Testing, testing, testing. Okay. Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth. Our meeting date is Monday, January 30th, 2023. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. Councillors are in the council chamber in Listowel, joined by the clerk and some staff who are supporting the meeting. We continue to use web conferencing technologies for some who will participate in this meeting. A warm welcome is extended to councillors, staff, and delegations who will participate in this meeting regardless of whether technology is being used or whether they're physically in attendance. We begin tonight's meeting with the playing of O Canada. Those in chambers as able are invited to stand.
O Canada, our
We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after this meeting as an archived video. To those viewing this meeting via the YouTube channel, a warm welcome to you. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. I invite you at this time to be decorous over the course of our coming meeting. I do have regrets tonight from Councillor Duncan, who is away, and Councillor Anstead, who I would like us to speak to at this moment, if we will. So we consulted about procedure today. Councillor Anstead had an accident while playing hockey, which requires him to have some surgery, and at the moment he is waiting for a date and action on this. He has asked, and I believe it appropriate, but we seek Council's consent, that we use the technology that we already have at our disposal to bring him into this Council meeting so that he may participate remotely this evening. So before we get to other matters relating to our agenda, I'm going to suggest to Council that we give consent to Councillor Anstead to be able to join us through the use of the Teams application that the clerk has ready and that he has the coordinates for. To that end, we'll need a motion because we are changing Council policy on this matter. And I think the motion is to the effect that we would allow Councillor Anstead to participate in Council meeting using virtual technologies. And everybody's got their hands up, so yeah, it doesn't matter, that's right. But we'll go with Councillor Blazek and Councillor Rothwell. Thank you. I trust you got sort of the gist of the resolution there. Everyone was very quick to jump on this, which is a gracious thing in my opinion. Any discussion or debate before we take a vote on this one? All right, seeing none, let's have that vote. Show of hands vote. Okay, oh, no, it just came up. Here we go.
And I would just like to add that Councillor Anstead would like to make a comment if he is able to.
Okay, so I think we've called for the vote. Let's continue with the vote as is usual with parliamentary procedure, and then we can bring Councillor Anstead in at his leisure. And that is carried by those in attendance. Now, if Councillor Anstead wishes to offer comment, let's find out if we can pull this off. Welcome, Councillor Anstead.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and good evening, Council. I just want to thank you for passing this resolution this evening. Obviously, this was an accident. It wasn't something that I wanted to have occur, and I will be back in the chambers as soon as I'm able. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anstead, and we wish you a speedy recovery. And the chatter in the chamber before was it doesn't sound like a pleasant thing. So we hope that you do well with this, and we look forward to seeing you soon. But we have you with us on the screen, and that's a productive thing. All right, let's move to item 2.1 of our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with a perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have already declared in writing to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing through the usual method with the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point in the meeting. Councillors, before we turn to mine, any of you have a declaration to make? All right, this evening there is a matter on our agenda, item 7.1, which is a request from the Atwood Lions Club for special gaming event support. Because I am a member of the Lions Club, I perceive the possibility of a pecuniary interest in this matter, so I will declare an interest here, and also on item 13.1, which is the confirmatory bylaw. So I'm out for that. Deputy Mayor Callum is aware and will be supporting me in those two items, executing them at the table at the right time. Anyone else? Just to make sure. All right, let's move forward then. All participants are invited to speak when called upon by yours truly, serving as chair. Clerk Klein will be watching for Councillor Anstedt's requests tonight as well. Certainly remote participants are asked to generally maintain a mute state in the web conference until I recognize your right to the floor. If when I do so recognize I don't hear you because you are muted or having some kind of technical difficulty, I will advise. Let's now focus, Council, on the people's business. I invite those in the chamber to silence and put away their phones. Regarding item 2.2 of our agenda, I have a motion before me for the adoption of the agenda for tonight's meeting that reads as follows: that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Andreessen, thank you. And Councillor Richardson will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor. My vote didn't pop up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anstead. And with that, we have the 9 required votes. That is carried. Next up then, we have, we're going to attend item 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. Consent items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they may require or warrant Council's recognition and action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, or individual action may do so. It's a big one tonight. We have 14 items on the consent agenda, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting. Councillors, anything to extract here or any corrections to the minutes that you would like noted? Let's go with Councillor Rothwell. Welcome, Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd and Council. Just 2 items. One is very straightforward, I suspect, from our county councillor members. Item 3.5, just an update on that decision of county council and regarding official plan amendment 212. And then the other issue is item 3.10. That's the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority draft work plan and budget. And specifically, it's regarding the recent legislative direction from the province regarding the municipality's ability to work with conservation authorities.
Okay, thank you. Let me check if there are any other requests to extract items that to discuss or explore. Okay, why don't we keep the procedure simple and we'll turn the floor back over to you, Councillor Rothwell. Let's go with 3.5 first.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd and Council. As Council will recall, we dealt with the matter presented through to us on that official plan amendment, which is the former Midwestern Regional Center, and the public meeting was held at the county, I believe, just recently, and just wanted to, for Council's information, if we could get an update from either yourself or our Deputy Mayor, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to go for it?
Question. Yes, it came to us last Thursday at County Council. Many were in attendance. It was very well received. We had one prior delegation that was approved. I believe it was from their planner from MHBC, yes. And then one of the members from the group came up and made other comments as well. They were aware of the situation that they are in and are going through the procedure. I believe now it will come back to this council and then back to the county.
Okay, thank
If
you.
anyone else would like to make comments, go
Yes,
ahead.
I see Ms. McMullen in the room with us. Lucky her. Perhaps Ms. McMullen would like to approach and provide us a little perspective from her take. For the public's benefit, Ms. McMullen is the manager of the planning service at the County of Perth, and so she's probably highly qualified to speak to this one.
Are we set? Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Kasenberg and members of council. What I can offer you about the public meeting that was held last Thursday at County Council is that the planner on the file, Susanna Reed, provided an overview of the application, went through all the proposed uses, and offered a specific run-through of provincial policy in particular, but also some official plan policy. And the highlight, I would say, of that presentation from Planner Reed was that the current application is seeking approval through a piece of the PPS that talks about rural lands or rural areas. And by definition, we don't actually have those in Perth County. We have prime agricultural lands. And so further discussion between the applicant and the planning department is going to take place. We received an email today to schedule that, to talk about the approach that the applicant has taken in their application. And there was considerable discussion about agricultural impacts and the MDS for 2 local livestock operations and how they might be affected by the application. We have received calculations on those, and they are displayed in the site concept that you may have seen when it was brought here to your council. And so the considerations that we're going to continue through this process of working with the developer to make is through a section of the PPS 263, I believe, that talks about when it's appropriate to permit something in a primary agricultural area. And there is sort of a window of opportunity for a proposal to attempt to establish through that policy, and there's 4 tests involved in that policy. And so the invitation from the planning department to the applicant right now is do your best effort to justify this proposal through those tests. And we'll continue discussing it. And there is a considerable amount of infrastructure and buildings on the site that are currently under remediation, and Ms. Reed also acknowledged the capacity of the current owner and their community to renovate and to steward this property into a good use. And so we will continue discussions on this policy question and whether or not this exception to a non-agricultural use in a prime ag area is appropriate. And a zoning bylaw amendment is also coming forward, has been submitted for review and is not yet deemed complete.
Thank you, Ms. McMullen. Do you have any supplemental?
No, not at all. Thanks very much. I appreciate that Sal's here. I think also notwithstanding the fact that the Deputy Mayor didn't.
Finding the right buttons is part of the fun of being mayor, I think. All right, let's try that. There we go. I'm going to presume you can hear me at the back. All right. So that's 3.5. And yeah, I think, actually that public meeting, from my take, was fairly fulsome. There were a lot of comments that were made and questions that were asked and so forth. So I think that this is on the roll. It has some hurdles. That was my take. And I think Sally's explained those fairly well. Let's look at 3.10 then, Councillor Rothwell. You wanted that one too?
Thank you much, Mayor Todd and Council. Just Council is aware of the proposed legislative changes that the province has made with respect to going into an area wherein they're telling municipalities what they can and can't do with respect to relationships and agreements with conservation authorities. And unfortunately, Councillor Duncan's not here, who's chair, I believe, of the MVCA. He could perhaps address it even better. And I'm not necessarily looking for an answer here. It's just an awareness that I'm sure the Conservation Authority, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, is aware of potential changes with respect to our relationship as a municipality with the Conservation Authority. And perhaps CAO Snell might be able to add additional comments, but I just wanted to highlight a concern I have with respect to the provincial legislative reach in that respect.
Yeah, I think there has been a spanner thrown into the works, as the saying goes. Let's turn to CAO Snell for a few comments, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Council. Thank you for the question, Councillor Rothwell. So both Grand River Conservation Authority and Maitland Valley Conservation Authority have made us aware at the staff level of the changes. So effectively, with the new legislation and regulations that became in effect on January 1st, the Conservation Authority is no longer allowed to or is prohibited from providing programs or services related to reviewing and commenting on proposals, applications, or other matters prescribed under a number of acts. The Drainage Act, the Aggregate Resource Act, and so on, and the Planning Act. The Conservation Authority will still review all development proposals under these acts to determine if the impact still is a natural hazard or drinking water source protection issue. So they still have those regulatory duties in place, and we'll still circulate all those applications to the Conservation Authority to make sure that we're in line with those existing regulations. In many ways, the relationship with MVCA is not changing a whole lot because they did get out of some of those services previous to this, just due to their own efficiencies. But we certainly will continue to work with both conservation authorities as partners as we proceed forward.
Just subsequent, if I may, Mayor Todd, this will mean that we'll have potentially a requirement for staff to undertake agreements with other parties that have specific knowledge or experience in dealing with matters which our own staff or county staff don't have the breadth of knowledge to investigate. So that's an awareness that I have, and then just as long as CAO Snell concurs, I suspect we'll see some potential changes with respect to our reviewing capacity here on applications that come forward under those types of legislative policies that you've mentioned. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. And I think among the challenges will be contracting some of that kind of support. Those people are fairly specialized experts, and finding them might not be so simple when there are 444 municipalities all looking for the same kind of services. So it could get interesting. All right. Anyone else with anything on the consent agenda? All right. Seeing nothing further then, let's lump it all together here as we like to do. Resolution as follows, that consent items 3.1 to 3.14 be received for information, and the minutes of the January 16th, 2023 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I call for a mover? Deputy Mayor Callum, thank you, and Councillor Johnston will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is not yet carried. We're waiting for one more. There we go. We got it carried with 9 votes. Thank you. All right. Is anyone else noticing a little bit of lag with eScribe tonight? Okay. This is not just at my station then. Very good. Thank you. Let's move forward to agenda item 4. We have no public meetings for this evening's council meeting. Further, we have no delegations that have asked for an audience with council this evening. That brings us to item 5, reports from departments and key staff. We have no reports from the CAO's department as item 5.1. but we certainly have some reports from the Strategic Initiatives portfolio as item 5.2 tonight. First up then is item 5.2.1. In this, our Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Jessica McLean, brings forward a report about our strategic plan refresh with a recommendation to pre-approve funding to a sole source as consulting support for this effort. I'll call on Ms. McLean to introduce Council to this report. Ms. McLean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and good evening, Council. As Council is aware, staff have begun the planning process for an update of the North Perth Corporate Strategic Plan. In November, past and current members of Council participated in a strategic plan training workshop. The purpose of the workshop was to review and gain feedback on the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan and future priorities. A summary report of the discussion is attached to the report for Council's information. To build off the discussion summary report and support the continuation of the 2023 to 2026 North Perth Strategic Plan update, Osterband Strategy has provided staff with a strategic plan update proposal. The plan update will involve in-depth consultation with staff, the community, and Council with the purpose of providing the municipality with a renewed focus and vision on current and future strategic priorities. The final report will provide an updated, refined, and refocused municipal strategic plan to guide North Perth's activities through the new term of Council. Tonight, staff are requesting to single source the services of Osterbrand Strategy for the strategic plan update project and to receive pre-budget approval for the project. The total cost is $28,000 plus HST, and the project will be funded through the Strategic Initiatives operating budget. I can now answer any questions Council may have.
All right, thanks, Ms. McLean. Questions from Council? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I have a resolution then for our consideration as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the attached North Perth Strategic Plan Discussion Summary Report as information, and that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the single source purchase of consulting services from Osterband Strategy to develop an updated North Perth Corporate Strategic Plan for the 2023 to 2026 Council term, and that the North Perth Corporate Strategic Plan project be pre-approved for inclusion in the 2023 North Perth budget at a cost of $28,000 plus HST to be funded through the Strategic Initiative Department operating budget. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Nordham, thank you. And Councillor Andreessen will be our seconder on this one. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Ms. McLean, you're still up. And now you're bringing forward a report that recommends Council endorse as a signatory for the purposes of adoption in the corporation, the Perth County Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Charter, and that this Council endorse the creation of a new committee to support DEI work in our community. The floor is still yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council may be aware, in 2021, the County of Perth undertook a significant community consultation process to develop a charter on diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And the charter was adopted by County Council in June of 2021. The enhancement of diversity, equity, and inclusion in North Perth was a key priority highlighted by members of Council in the North Perth Council Strategic Planning Training Workshop that was held in November. Staff recommend that the Municipality of North Perth adopt an adapted version of the Perth County Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Charter, which is attached to the report for Council's review. Additionally, staff recommend that Council develop a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. The goal of the committee would be to advise and assist staff, Council, and citizens on matters related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensure that North Perth adheres to its commitments to be a welcoming and inclusive community as established in the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Charter. If Council is agreeable to the development of the DEI Advisory Committee, staff will draft and bring forward a terms of reference for Council's consideration at a future meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ms. McLean. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you very much through you, Mayor Kasenberg, and thank you, Jessica. I appreciate your report. I'm quite supportive of this approach in terms of adopting a charter for diversity, equity, and inclusion. My only question would be is that for this charter to really work, we're really going to need training on an ongoing basis as a council so that we continue to grow in terms of our understanding of how to use that as a lens. And I saw that in the report, but do you have a sense of, what that training would look like, if it's something we would do annually or more often? Any thoughts on that kind of training?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. It's definitely something that we can look into, and there's lots of different options out there that I know would be available, so we can see what the best fit would be for council, and perhaps the advisory committee could help with that process as well.
Thank you. Just secondary to that, I fully believe in adopting a charter. It's just that it won't come to life unless we really continue to unpack it and really understand what that looks like. So, yeah, hopefully through the committee that might be something that could be done too. All right, thank you.
Find the right buttons here. Thank you. Anyone else with the questions or first comments on this matter? Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and thank you, Jessica, for the reports. Just following up on Councillor Andreessen's comments regarding education, I think this is not only a council education need, but staff as well as our public, our whole community needs to have opportunities to learn more about the importance of diversity, equity, and anti-racism charter, what this means, and whether it's people that are our neighbors or our children at our school or teachers or whatever that is. I think it's important that to be a welcoming community, it's more than council. It's our staff and it's our whole community that's going to welcome and embrace our new comers, and as well as those that are currently with us to deal with this whole diversity, equity, and anti-racism charge. So I'm certainly in favor and look forward and echo the comments and agree with them that Councillor Andreessen raised. Thank you.
Okay, anyone further? I'll indicate that not all that long ago, I had the opportunity with staff to participate in a roundtable with a number of individuals in our community who are people of color or of minority status. And in that conversation, what was remarkable to me as we sort of turn from talking about the challenges they faced in our community to what should we do is the commitment of every single one of them. And there were probably 7 or 8 who are participating, some who've been here 35 or 40 years, and some who've been here 1 year. The commitment on the part of every one of them to participate in actions that move us towards creating greater welcoming in our community, greater acceptance. They were so bold as to pronounce their interest in an ambassadorial program. And I think that was a very encouraging first step. It's something that I've been sort of thinking about and hoping to get some traction on. And so for me, tonight's opportunity to both borrow from the county's work on this and adopt it in our own organization and to set the stage for future work through a committee, I think this is a very positive outcome and very encouraged by it. Anyone else with comments or questions at this point? All right, I have a resolution then for our consideration as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth adopts the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Charter, and that all departments be directed to incorporate the Charter into their annual work plans, and that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth establishes a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee and directs staff to develop terms of reference to be presented to Council for consideration at a later date. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Johnston, thank you. Who would like to be our seconder? Councillor Richardson, thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move forward. Item 3 for Ms. McLean. She's brought forward a report that outlines possibilities for the investment by this council in affordable and attainable housing. This is a key strategic matter, and this presents council with some decision opportunities at this point. Some of them might seem a little vague still, but I think Ms. McLean is going to help us walk our way through some of the important facts about the report that she's put on the floor and the opportunities that present. Ms. McLean, the floor is yours. Let me just get the camera on you.
Thank you, Mayor Kirstenberg. At the 2023 budget visioning session, short and long-term affordable housing plans and projects were noted as a priority by multiple members of North Perth Council. To plan and budget for housing projects, staff were requesting additional direction from Council. It is important to understand the broad range of housing options in Canada. Affordable housing includes housing provided by the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. It also includes all forms of housing tenure. This includes rental, ownership, and cooperative ownership, as well as temporary and permanent housing. The housing continuum pictured in the report showcases the broad range of housing options available to a range of households in different tenures. A summary of public comments collected through an affordable housing survey that was featured on the Your Say North Perth website last summer is also attached to the council report for information. At this time, staff are requesting direction or comments from council on 4 areas regarding affordable housing and 2023 capital budget plans. First, based off the housing options listed in the housing continuum, which housing options or types should be targeted for municipal housing plans and projects? For example, affordable rentals, affordable ownership, supportive housing, or social or subsidized housing. Second, whether specific demographic populations should be targeted for municipal housing plans and projects. For example, affordable rental or ownership housing that targets workforce housing needs, and that is for youth, young families, or potential employees. Third, what funding options council wishes to explore or not explore for municipal housing plans and projects. And fourth, if council wishes to go forward with municipal-driven housing projects, direction is also requested on the preferred scope or size of the project. This would include number of bedrooms, size and type of building, or if there will be rental or ownership, and what type of management options council would be interested in exploring further. Financial implications of council's preferred housing project or plan will be included in the 2023 capital budget proposal. I can answer any questions council may have or give supportive information.
Okay, so we're at that head-spinning point, of course, council, because we have 4 different dimensions that Ms. McLean has proposed she's seeking advice on behalf of the staff. Some of that, of course, requires understanding that housing continuum, which many of us have seen before, but at times might feel a little uncomfortable in terms of definitions. I think maybe the thing that I should ask at this point is, and certainly we want to get out on the floor, questions of fact or things that you're not too sure about that you'd really like to ask that will help us move forward to a little further thinking about the 4 dimensions that Ms. McLean's asked us about. So does anyone want definitions, have any questions of fact that you'd like clarified at this point in time? Councillor Andreessen, let me get your microphone. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kasenberg. Can you just, I'm getting confused on the word dimension, I apologize. Is that supported affordable market rate? You said 4 dimensions, so I'm just confused. Sorry, if you don't mind just clarifying that piece of it.
So maybe it's the mayor who needs to explain. In the report, there seems to be sort of 4 types of decisions that they're seeking information about. One is sort of a leverage point of where we could focus in the housing continuum. The second is the types of people that we're trying to help with an affordable housing strategy. The third is what kind of funding tools available to us should staff be exploring? So that's the third dimension. And the fourth dimension, and please don't break out into song at this point, pertains to the size of units. Some of us are old enough to know that. I'm appreciative that the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Rothwell are chuckling. The type of units, the type of housing, how many bedrooms are we talking about, et cetera. So to me, there's sort of four pieces in there that staff is seeking a little bit of direction on. The problem is it's sort of like eating an elephant, right? There's lots of tablespoons that have to be consumed here for us to eat this one, and I think we can all sort of acknowledge that on each of the four dimensions we may be expert at some and largely uninformed about others. So a little bit of a challenge, right? Does that help clarify my terminology, not hers, mine?
If I could ask another question, does one of those dimensions also include funding? Like a funding approach?
I think the third dimension is about funding approach. So it talks, if you look at
Like
the report
that's
about.
what you meant by tools?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
So we're using the same terms. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Councillor Rothwell?
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and through you to Jessica, thanks very much for you and the staff that prepared the report. Just for clarification, there's a couple of issues here. Just on page 1 of the report, page 90 of our agenda package. So do we have actually specific numbers that help us within the North Perth context? Because the first part talks about ownership, and it's on the basis of the housing for which the purchase price is at least 10% below the average purchase price of a resale unit within the regional market area. So our regional market area is broader than just North Perth, but do we actually have a number here attached to that? And then secondly, in terms of the rental, like have we talked with local real estate professionals and so on, so we actually have a number? Like I don't disagree with the terminology here, the definition, but the definition I think for all of our context, we need to have a number so we know what that actually is. Do we know what that is, Jessica? For you?
I'm trying to think from memory. I believe for like a studio apartment, it's around 800. And for a 1-bedroom, 1,200. But I would have to confirm those numbers.
Thank you very much, and I'm not asking you to go from memory at all, and I haven't got the figures here. I will say when I was researching after our report here is that on our website's a great presentation that was made up by the United Way that gave the facts and figures there. So it's helpful if we all want to sort of be aware of the information that's there. But we all know that the housing market has changed considerably over this past even 6 months. So the numbers are variable. I think we all know that, but they're still very high. And I think it's clear, based at least on the information on the United Way presentation, is that it's not just the price, it's the availability or lack of availability. I think those are the critical issues that I think from a factual standpoint, I think it's important that we all are aware of. And further, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is just through you, Jessica, any collaboration or discussions that you've had or staff have had with the Perth Stratford Housing Corporation or any social services agencies, and specifically the numbers that are on their by name list, so that we actually know factually what it is that people within our community are asking for, they need. So whether it's a single person or a family with children or without children, or someone needs accessible housing and so on. So I wouldn't be so bold to say none of us around the council table have a definitive opinion to give on this, but I don't, certainly I would not give an opinion to say I think we need more townhouses, 2-bedroom townhouses available, for people that have accessibility needs or something like that. I think we need to have some more factual details, and if we could build that in to the recommendation in the report, I would be more comfortable with that. And I apologize that the email that I thought I had sent through to staff somehow didn't go. Nevertheless, I think it's trying to be helpful in terms of the importance of this matter that we bring forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rothwell. Let me turn to Ms. McLean. I see Mr. Snell suiting up with his microphone too, so it looks like he may have some comments to make, but let's go to Ms. McLean first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did recently have a meeting with the City of Stratford's Social Services Department, and they offered to come and make a presentation to Council. So we'll be sure that it includes some of those facts. I recall that single persons looking for accommodations was the highest priority at this time.
Here, go.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I think, I appreciate the conversation and the question from council tonight, because this is part of the problem I think staff are having when we tackle this project, or as the mayor said, we tackle the elephant, because I think it really is an elephant. And I frankly, I think the answer to Councilor Ruffles' questions is they're all needed at an affordable, attainable price. That's the challenge. We can't probably do that all at once. We can try and look for some hard data too, but I think the unfortunate part is I suspect even if we use the PPS standard, that still doesn't make housing affordable for a good chunk of our community. And I think that's the challenge. And then when we're meeting with our community partners, one of the first questions they always ask staff is, what are you bringing to the table? And so far we're reluctant to say anything because we're not really sure the commitment the council has for a project. So whether that's land, money, resources, all those sort of things. So we've had a number of meetings with United Way. The mayor and I met with Habitat for Humanity some time ago. We met with City of Stratford Housing. Everybody's certainly willing to be a partner, but one of the questions that we ultimately are unable to answer is what is the first commitment to the housing problem as of right now, and that's where we're a little stuck as staff.
Indeed, yeah. I think we're facing this challenge. We're trying to pin down something, but it feels like it's not easily pinned down because the need is sort of broad. What's drawn to my mind, and maybe you have it at your fingertips, is the Stratford, Perth County, St. Mary's Housing and Homelessness Plan that was published by the City of Stratford as the Consolidated Service Manager. What I recall from that was one expression of need for more supportive housing. And perhaps we'll ask Ms. McLean to explain what supportive housing is in a moment. We'll put her to the test. And two, that a lot of the units that seem to be missing in our housing market related to one bedrooms, that it was very much about the sort of most urgent needs seem to be a deficit of one bedroom and bachelor style apartments in the rental market, which you can relate to because that absolutely affects labor reliability and labor availability in our community, right? So those were the two take-homes that somehow stuck in this old brain. Let's put you to the test. Supportive housing, would you like to explain so that council understands that concept?
So supportive housing, in addition to being financially affordable for the residents that live there, it also provides day-to-day supports for them that helps them live independently. So this could include access to meals, assistance with personal care needs, as well as social services present on site. So it does include a bit more of a management approach and some staff resources.
And perhaps, Ms. McLean, just to support understanding, can you comment on how many supportive housing units we believe are available in North Perth and what the waiting list might be like?
Do you have that number?
So actually, I did speak to Director of Social Services, Kim McElroy, and she's providing some of that information to us. I just haven't got it as of yet, but I believe the number is 8 units right now, but I am looking for some of that data you just asked for about waiting lists.
Right. And those 8 units reflect a certain intensity because they have individuals living in them who need support such as mental health counseling, budget planning, activity supports, in some cases nursing and so forth, right? When we talk about supportive housing, we're talking about bringing a variable basket of human supports and therefore staff to the equation. And in North Perth, that was my understanding as well, that we had 8 units total at this point in time. So supportive housing is a significant investment in a whole bunch of ways, right? But it's certainly one of the areas that has been identified in the Stratford Perth Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. Let's keep talking. Councillor Andreessen?
So through you, Mayor Kasenberg, we have, kind of sizzling on a burner, the access center that we are hoping to, have happen here in North Perth. It's got a long way to go. So my question is that as that is simmering, is that a project that we could elevate? Because it would have a component of supportive housing, and to my knowledge, as well as some other housing as part of it. And it could be, I would call lower hanging fruit, because there are a lot of plans kind of in the works behind the scenes with some other partnerships. Could that be something that could be part of elevating and moving forward with potential grants coming up and meeting the need at the moment, and might be lower hanging fruit?
So certainly the next item on our agenda tonight is about that very project, or at least in part about that very project. But Ms. McLean, if you want to make some comments on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question and comment. As the mayor mentioned, we will be talking about that in the next report. And we have been having conversations with the United Way, Perth Huron, and the Community Renewal Company on the status of that project and how we can support it. And we can definitely look more into the ways that we can support it, such as supporting the capital fundraising campaign that will be coming up.
Okay, so possibilities there, certainly. Anyone else have questions that sort of you want some facts clarified? I'm worried that the challenge here is that we're trying to do a lot in a meeting like this, and that perhaps what may be needed is a all-council workshop wherein we bring in some of the players who will have the data that we need or the insights that we need to help us focus our corporate energy on this area. The challenge that I face is that I know that we've got these sort of 4 dimensions as I've classified them, and here we are. We're trying to say, or staff is saying, please help us by pointing us in directions in each of the 4 dimensions. But it's pretty hard for us to do because facts seem a little bit uncertain, and we don't really have the full range of experts available to us. But I also think, and I'm looking around in your faces, I'm hoping you'll smile at me at least, that we have goodwill about this, that we intend to get on with this in some way. And so how can we move forward? And maybe one of the suggestions that I'll put on the table in terms of facilitating here is that we need to have a special council meeting that focuses just on this topic, and that we workshop it, and we invite the Ms. McElroy from the city, and we invite Mr. Erb from the United Way, and other players who know a lot about this subject matter. Let's not forget Ms. McMullen from the county. She's sitting back there looking innocent in the gallery, but she would be a player who we would invite, right, so that we could have a fulsome discussion. I'm open to continuing this discussion if council would like to. And before I try to do anything to shorten it. Let me turn to CAO Snell and ask for feedback on what you've heard so far with regards to the challenge that this council faces in trying to support. So CAO Snell.
So actually, Jessica and I had this conversation already pre the meeting, just because we knew how daunting this task that we were asking council to do. So we actually anticipated this to be an outcome because we've been struggling at the same level. So certainly, I think that's a great option. In the meantime, I think we might even try and put together some pre-consultation, just because even if we could narrow this down even a little bit, because when you look at even the housing spectrum, we could probably, even if we could even narrow that down to even 2 or 3 areas we'd like to concentrate on, because I think even for people like Ryan and Kim to come and speak, they still need to almost narrow that target, just so we're not spending an all day at a workshop and not coming to some sort of eventual end.
Okay, so to me, and forgive me for sort of saying a lot on this one, I think the most significant question for staff, realistically, is what are the tools that we're prepared to use to try to achieve some outcome, right? So middle of, I think it's the second page of the report, where there are comments about grant funding opportunities, land donations, changes in tax levy or using reserves, development charges and adjustments there to support, right? And that's probably the area that they would like the information about the most and the soonest, if I'm not mistaken, in part because there are grant opportunities, and the next item on our agenda addresses that. But I don't want to leave the staff blowing in the wind, but it is kind of a daunting thing. Maybe what this council needs to do is address in a workshop 3 of the 4 things, and leave the tools as sort of the thing that we could talk about sooner, just or even today, as a matter of sort of principle, things that we want to talk about. But it is still hard to talk about the tools, like development charge changes, right? I've seen previous councils talk about development charges and changing them in favor of affordable housing. And it's hard to talk about those in the context of what you're going to work on. And so I see Councillor Richardson nodding his head. Like, I think that's a significant, that there's a barrier there. So we're kind of caught with the cart and the horse problem here. I'm mixing my animals up tonight a lot, aren't I? And some farm, some not. But I think that there's something to be said for a workshop. I will ask council this, though, and because the next item kind of hints at it, maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but there's grant funding opportunities that are out there now. And obviously staff is wondering, should we be putting effort towards those, or do we need to be more coherent, right? Now, the good news is that in the next report, there's some information that is helpful and shows that staff has been working towards some of the grant funding opportunities that might be available to us. So it may be that the choice that we make in the next section of the agenda will give staff a little point in the right direction with regards to our attitude towards the tools, if that makes sense. Let's see, Councillor Rothwell, you've had your hand up for a while quite patiently.
That's good.
So let's
Thanks
go.
very much, Mayor Todd. This is crucial for all of us, and we've had plenty of conversation. I heard CAO Snell talk about when people come regarding what the municipality can do. And I think we have to look in historically what North Perth Council have done, the councils before us. So when Habitat for Humanity came at least twice to these tables and asked council as to whether or not they'd be willing to offer up land at reduced cost or whatever the cost was, they said yes. And as a result, there was 70 attached dwellings built, at least on 2 properties I'm aware of. And perhaps others. So it's one thing to talk, it's another thing to do. So clearly that's been shown to happen. When we talk about planning applications and review, we've had various applications come forward, and North Perth is able to, and the county are able to process applications faster than many other jurisdictions that are out there. The critical thing I would also say is that we have talked about the importance of engaging with the public, especially in the creation of secondary dwelling units within their existing buildings, and that this is, and certainly with the legislative changes that the province has come forward with, it talks specifically about foregoing funding for development charges and so on for accessory dwelling units, as I recall. So there's a critical issue there that shows historically what North Perth Council has been willing to do to bring not just words to the table, but sell land, make things happen, as well as on the application processing, as well as other administrative matters. Council's also reduced specific amounts for a development charge, which is sort of off the table now because the province has dealt with that by foregoing it, not just reducing it. But it's a willingness to at least have those discussions. But I think it's crucial as a first step is to engage in our community and encourage anyone that would want to develop additional dwelling units within their existing dwellings to put a process together, encourage and support that to happen. And if we truly need to have additional one bedroom, for example, units, that can be done very quickly versus building a new dwelling or building a new apartment building, which does take a long time. And not to, rain on anybody's parade, but just today there's an article in the paper about the fact that the federal government program, which provides funding to encourage building of new affordable dwelling units, basically because of the pandemic, which dealt with reduced labor force availability, trades in particular, but also the issues with the pandemic for reduced availability and supply chain issues for building supplies. They have not materialized in the numbers. And that's not to say that they won't happen, it's just that they're not happening within the 12 to 18 months that were anticipated under intakes 1 and 2. The hope is intake 3. They're giving more timelines, as I understand, or longer timelines, 18 months to 24 months. It's a reflection of reality. But everybody wants to be able to build, and you can't all have the same contractor. There are a few of them now, and they're stretched thin. So I hope what I'm saying is, at least in terms of providing, at least my opinion, is that this is not something that we need to go madly off in all directions. If we need to, as Councillor Andreessen talked about low-hanging fruit, talking to our community members that are willing to undertake investment to transform an area within their dwelling for an appropriate dwelling unit with building a permit approval and stuff, that we put sort of an action team together to make that happen. The services are already there and so on. So I think if we really want to see fast action, at least in one segment, that's what I would say as one option. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rothwell. Lots of wisdom there. CAO Snell.
Thank you. I can assure Council that staff is always willing and able to help anybody who's approached us about second dwelling units. We've continued to make that part of our day-to-day tasks. And certainly one of the questions that we asked in the survey last July was anybody who needed information, we could get them in touch with the appropriate people to assist with them on that too. So we certainly have reached out to the community in both our surveys and in our some of our correspondence, social media and otherwise, to make sure that anybody who's looking at the development of a single or a secondary dwelling unit has the information. We can assist them, and we certainly want to do that both for the safety of both the resident and the tenant, as well as create those new housing units.
Yeah, I think the interesting question, and this is where we have potentially more skin in the game, is whether we create some kind of incentive program to support those conversions. That's the question, right? We can rely on the market, and as CAO Snell says, probably any marketing effort can be, improved or optimized, right? But efforts have certainly been made towards second dwelling units or additional residential units in homes and businesses, and it doesn't seem like it's scared up much attention or business yet. We can amplify the marketing, yes, but we can also look at what would reasonable incentives be to do it. And maybe that's an interesting question for council to consider, right? That goes back to the tools. What are the tools that are available to allow that to happen? And should council, and I guess I'm framing the question really bluntly, should council invest in that way in the housing market? Councillor Andreessen, please.
We attended the Rural Ontario Municipal Association conference. A number of councillors and as well you, Mayor Kaysenberg, attended. And one of the things they talked about was that very tool of incentivizing how developers and using that as a tool to definitely attract the growth of housing in these different areas. And I would like to have a greater discussion around how do we incentivize these secondary units that we're speaking of, that Councillor Rothwell was speaking about, because I think in order for this to happen more and grow in this community, we may have to do that. I'd also like to see that same kind of tool used with possible developers as well, who may be interested in developing housing in that type of framework, but giving them an opportunity to more or less be rewarded for that choice. But I believe here at this table, we're going to have to come up with some tools as to what that looks like to incentivize, that kind of development.
Yeah, thank you. So that's an issue that probably needs to be considered some more. Ms. McLean.
Thank you for those comments. So staff are looking at the inclusion of proposing a housing community improvement plan in our 2023 budget proposal. And those often include financial incentive programs that would promote secondary dwelling units being built in the private market.
Thanks, Ms. McLean. And this is something also being talked about at Perth County as well. I understand there are sort of preliminary conversations, at least, about a CIP that's devoted to housing. Certainly it's come up. Councillor Johnston is next.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of a workshop or a special council meeting or just one night dedicated to this, because I think we could spend the next 4 hours, and I'm not sure we'd reach any agreement. Because it's so broad. I do believe one of our greatest attributes to this could be land, if we have some that is available, I hope. The other, when you talk about who to invite to a workshop, I wonder if we should be looking at some business owners that are struggling for employees, that they might have something to bring to the table. Just last week I spoke to a large dairy company that would love to expand in the province, and their number one priority is employees, not cost of land, cost of building, closeness to the product. It's, can they get 200 employees to work next year? And if that's their, so that tells me that, we need the workforce housing. So that's my top priority.
Okay, so thoughts about who might be invited as key informants at our council meeting if we elect to do that. Thank you. And certainly I can tell you, CAO Snell and I had the encounter recently with a food chain manufacturer that has actually purchased homes in Listowel for the purposes of housing their people. So there's some thinking going on about this. It's just, how do we accelerate that? How do we incentivize that? How do we support that, right? To your point, labor reliability and availability is as significant a problem as affordable housing. But actually, if you ask why often enough, you come back down to the affordability of housing being the barrier in the labor reliability equation. Councillor Richardson next, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and thank you for the report, Jessica. I totally agree with what's been mentioned around the table, that trying to come to a consensus this evening with this entire report, it's back to my old adage that staff will remember for how long is a piece of rope. There's so many questions that we don't have unanswered, that are unanswered at this point in time, to come to a specific point that we need to target on that. Every one of those aspects of all of the continuum are very important. And this is so important to the municipality. Number one, it's important at the end of the day for the residents of North Perth to get the type of housing that they can either attain, afford, or get the help and services that they require, or to be able to maintain the ownership going forward with increasing costs. However, if there's a municipal aspect of involvement in it, of which on one aspect I feel that there should be, can provide a little bit control to the scenario, but there's also a significant cost that's going to be associated with that as well. That I'm in total agreement of having a workshop and having the professionals, what word am I looking for the people who are dedicated in that field day after day after day to bring their 2 cents to the table and to provide that information. And I also agree with Councillor Johnson making mention that I understand that the market just in the last 6 months has changed in the housing market, and that the market might start to correct things a little bit, but I don't know if the market is going to correct enough to do that. That I honestly think that the employees that are so hard to find right now, that employers might be quite willing to at least have some part of the conversation, have a little skin in the game, because it ultimately could benefit them right now. Because, and this is indicative to everywhere in southwestern Ontario, but I'm fully in support of having a workshop and getting some more relevant information. If we're coming down to, like I said, they're all important, and then I'll be quiet. But I also think that affordable renting and affordable ownership is incredibly important to do that, and I'm only basing that from my own experience. Trying to find adequate rental was incredibly challenging. Even not even so much if it was affordable, just for the availability in the stock, because it just did not exist, period. Full stop. However, I'm in agreement of going forward, that I think that this is something that we could sit and lament here for hours and never come to a consensus, but having something dedicated with the professionals to it would be a significant benefit. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Has Councillor Anstett indicated any expression of desire to speak to this? Okay. Just want to make sure we don't miss him on this one. Councillor Johnston, briefly.
Can I just encourage staff to think outside the box? And I don't think there's anything that's off the table here as far as ideas. I think let's be a leader, not a follower. And if you've got an idea that you think is a little bit out there, let's see where it goes. That we can maybe do something different.
You have to worry about my out-of-the-box ideas.
Yes.
Sorry,
we can bring
I didn't
yours,
say that publicly.
We can reel yours in a lot easier than theirs.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Kell. Exactly. Apparently, you're a fisherman. Indeed. I think we will succeed as we show compassion and innovation. When we bring both to the table, that's when we will start to make a difference in this issue. All right, I have taken the liberty of drafting a resolution towards a workshop approach. Would council like to receive this? I see nods of heads, so all right. So the resolution is that the council of the municipality receives a report entitled Council Direction on Affordable Housing for Information, and that council directs staff to prepare a special council meeting with a focus on affordable and attainable housing options outlined in the report, and inviting experts who can support decision-making by this council. Moved by Councillor Nordum, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Andreessen. That's what I saw. Any discussion or debate further on this? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. I fully agree with the motion that's on the floor. I'm just wondering for staff, if that workshop, if it's agreed, that if staff could prepare a plan that was asked for in terms of municipal land, that's owned in the municipality, just so that if we do get into talking about, so where do we own land? If we could have that as part of our conversation, I think that would be helpful.
I think, in fact, if we're wise about this, each of us should be entitled to send our questions in advance about data or things that have been on our mind, so that staff knows the kind of stuff that we're looking for, right? It's a big field. Some of the information is very precise, some of it's not so. And so if we ask our questions ahead of time, sort of a question box, if you will, I think that would be helpful. CAO Snell's nodding his head, so I think, and to Councillor Johnston's earlier point, no question is off the table, just as no idea is off the table right at the top, right? So if staff can arrange that as sort of inherent part of setting up for the workshop, that would be helpful. Any further discussion or debate or questions or comments? You know what we're voting on, which is to create a workshop opportunity at some point. I didn't put a timeline on this, but I think staff appreciates the anxiety that we all have on this issue and that we'd like to get to it. All right, then I think we should have the vote.
My vote didn't come up. I'm in favor.
All right, Councillor Rothwell votes in favor. With that, we have 9 votes. That is carried. Thank you. Councillors, before we move off this subject, do any of you have any additional resolutions you want to put in the books about this at this occasion? Okay, so we're not seeing that. So now Ms. McLean is going to get more specific. We have some real opportunities that are immediate or fairly immediate, and they're concrete. We can actually talk about them in real terms. So item 5.2.4, Ms. McLean is going to talk about plays that we can make in the very short term. In particular, there's a reference to the Rapid Housing Initiative Round 3, which is intended to be a rural round, funding program through the CMHC, which is an agency of the Government of Canada. So Canada has put some money on the table, and they're saying, we'd like to help some rural projects at this point for affordable housing. And we have not, in previous rounds of RHI, submitted an application. Council should know that as sort of a baseline. That we never did submit one before, despite this mayor's trying to kick rear ends to get that to happen. So here we are. We have that as a potential opportunity, but a couple of others. And I'm stealing all your thunder. I should really shut up. But on with the report, please, Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the application window for round 3 of the Rapid Housing Initiative is now open, and it closes on March 15th. This funding supports new construction of affordable housing units, the acquisition of land and buildings for conversion of non-residential to affordable housing, or the acquisition of land and buildings in disrepair or abandoned state for rehabilitation to affordable housing. The RHI prioritizes shovel-ready projects that can be completed within 18 months of a funding agreement being established. Units must be ready for occupancy by at least January 2025. All RHI funding units must be dedicated to vulnerable populations, and projects must consist of 5 or more net new units. Units must remain affordable for at least 20 years. Once this funding window opened up, staff began discussing potential affordable housing projects that the municipality could submit. Council direction is being requested on a preferred project if application timelines can be met. So the first project that we are looking at, which was discussed earlier, is the North Perth Access Centre. Staff are currently participating in discussions with United Way, Perth Huron, and the Community Renewal Company regarding an RHI application for the residential portion of the Access Centre project. Community Renewal staff are currently finalizing some questions on the project's eligibility for funding. If the Access Centre project is suitable, the Community Renewal Company has requested that the municipality be the lead applicant on the application for funding, as the requirements are less cumbersome for municipal governments. Staff feel that this project would have the highest chance of success for RHI funding. The second project that we have looked at to put towards this funding is we did a review of municipally owned land that could accommodate new construction of affordable housing within the short window of the RHI funding. And the vacant municipal property in Atwood that is abutting the trail system and was previously studied for the Atwood Library was identified as a potential site. Preliminary investigation into this site found that a new or updated Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment would be required to move forward with a record of site condition. And preliminary comments from Perth County planning staff noted the potential or the need for a zoning bylaw amendment and potentially an official plan amendment. Staff anticipate that the timeline required for the Phase 1 ESA and Phase 2 ESA, the record of site condition submission, and the planning applications could make this project at this time ineligible for the current intake of RHI funding. However, we feel that this project does have potential and is worthwhile, and if council is agreeable, we would like to keep working on the planning aspects of this project. Given the unknown eligibility of the first two projects to meet the timelines of the funding, we did brainstorm on other options that we could look at. And this includes a unique opportunity to issue an RFP to property owners that would be interested in selling or leasing non-residential property for the purpose of conversion to affordable housing. So for example, a vacant commercial property, either an upper floor or other space. To meet the RHI application deadline of March 15th, the RFP would need to have a short turnaround time. Staff would then work with the property owner that was interested to develop an agreement of sale and lease and complete the RHI application. So at this time, looking for any comments council has on these potential projects for the RHI funding.
Thanks, Ms. McLean. So hopefully council understands that there are three sort of options. Two of the three seem very usual and conventional in some ways because they represent development on either a greenfield or a brownfield in the case potentially of the library and the access center. The challenge there is the clock. If I'm following the bouncing ball, the clock is the issue both for the access center and for the Atwood property. Care to comment on interactions you've had with United Way about this one, perhaps?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We met with the United Way Perth Huron and the Community Renewal Company on Friday and had discussion on an application for the Access Center to the RHI program. The United Way staff, Community Renewal staff, were going to get some answers to a few questions that the group had today. So hoping to get an update on those this week. And there's potential that we'd have to look into changing some design aspects of the Access Center in order to meet the criteria of the RHI funding.
Okay, so that just to follow, being Captain Obvious here, that means that could run the clock out a little further, making the timeline less desirable rather than more desirable, if I'm following this carefully, right?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. Do you have, I'll get there, do you have any confidence, though, that we could hit that January 2025 target for Access Center rental spaces?
Compared to the other options, I do believe the Access Center would have the most success in meeting that deadline.
Okay. And it's a substantial project, so that, I think it's in the report, but so that council knows, there are certainly a number of residential units in that project, in the 40 range, if I remember right. CEO Snell, did you want to pick up here?
Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the interesting parts... Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I think one of the interesting parts of our conversation on Friday, too, is that the community renewals and the United Way staff have demonstrated to us, at least in very rough figures that if we were to get RHI funding, the Access Center actually was a viably financial model, to which was quite interesting. Because that was always one of our concerns with the Access Center was what the long-term sustainability looked like. So I think if we could get the complete RHI money for the residential part, we could certainly pull off the rest of the model in a sustainably financially way. So that has some interest. I think all these sites are challenging, and certainly, even though we had hints of the RHI coming, these short time windows are always a challenge when we're looking for a turnaround application in 4 months, and some of that's over the Christmas season. So I would like to think that we could, even if we don't look at the municipally owned property, that we at least continue to have that ready for another round of shovel-ready applications, because that seems to be the intent of most of these applications.
Okay. Let's turn to you for questions or first comments on this matter. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mayor Todd, and thanks, Jessica, for the report. One question I have is option 3 there. We talk about RFP for existing buildings. What about any vacant lands? Would that also, is that a possibility as well for if a property owner had vacant land, if they would want to potentially come forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do believe it is, but I can confirm with the program guildelines, but I do believe it is.
I think there's some potential for that. Now, the last question I have, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is are there private property owners that are eligible for this program as well? I believe there are.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the program is directed towards municipal, provincial, territorial governments, nonprofit organizations, and Indigenous organizations.
Okay, fair enough. I could be wrong. I believe this council, we had the apartment complex on the west side of Mitchell Road South. I thought that they were under a funding program. I'm not saying it's the
Right, it's not the
RHI.
same.
I believe it's a separate one through the CMHC. So it's a federal program as well, but it's a different one. Is that correct?
Right.
Good. Thank you.
Keep your hand up. Councillor Andreessen is next.
Yes, thank you. In terms of my comments, all 3 projects I see as, great possible ideas. And all 3, I'd like to see continued discussion and movement forward with all 3. But I would like to say that in terms of the RHI application for funding, I feel like our North Perth Access Centre project might be the best option in terms of being approved with this type of timeline and this type of application. I think we'd probably be in good position to finish this off and to perhaps even be approved. So I'd like to see us move forward with the Access Center project if possible, but also keep the other ones top of mind.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with comments? Deputy Mayor Kellum.
Yes, and thank you through you, Mayor Todd, and thank you for the report, and to my colleagues for your comments. And I totally agree with Councillor Andreessen 100%. All 3 projects are very important. Option 2, as CEO Snell said, could be months, years out getting the EA studies, but I think we're ready with the building downtown, and I fully support that also. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see another hand? Councillor Blazek, did I see your hand up? Let me find your microphone. There we go.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. I love the idea of taking existing properties and converting them into usable space. I absolutely love that idea. Has the staff put out any feelers with any of the owners of those spaces that would give us an idea of whether or not that would be something that we could pull together by the application deadline? Do we have any feelers out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not yet, but we could start that this week if council was in support of that.
Okay, I mean, The choice here, and I think we should be clear about this, that we are essentially allowed one RHI application. So we have these, three possibilities, and perhaps if we sat around and used our brains, we could come up with more, right? But we have these three opportunities at this point in time. And so I just want to make sure that we understand that we can only put in one. Sorry, let me get your microphone. I'm getting ahead of myself. Go ahead.
So then I think it's pretty easy. I think the Access Center, if it's the most likely one to be successful, I think it's likely one of the most needed projects that we have in North Perth as well. So I would support number one, the North Perth Access Center as our RHI.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to make any arguments about what this resolution should look like? So let me ask the question, because I think it's an important question. The resolution right now talks about applying for round 3 rapid housing initiative, and we're going to fill in the blank. And it sounds to me like I should fill in the blank of North Perth Access Center at this point for the resolution. But we heard commitments from Councillor Andreessen and Deputy Mayor Kellum saying, but let's supply some gas to the other two as well. And so I find myself wondering, and I just want to ask the logistics question, does staff have capacity to, for example, issue an RFI or a market sounding that would inquire about people who, or parties, let's say parties, that wish to sell their property or lease their property for the sake of affordable housing? Is there capacity to do something like that? And is there capacity, or should we set the wheels in motion with regards to these EAs that are required in Atwood so that we get ourselves, bench ready kind of thing? Let me ask the capacity question first. Ms. McLean, you first. If you need CAO Snell, by all means.
I think so. Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, staff does have the capacity to do that.
Okay, so we could do a market sounding RFI or that kind of thing to find out whether there's anyone in our community who is interested in that kind of arrangement, sale, lease, partnership of some sort. CAO Snell, you've got the microphone.
I think certainly staff could, bringing these three options forward tonight, we've already made some progress in all three of them. And I think, although we will have to prioritize, just because with the March 15th deadline coming out quickly, but as Ms. McLean already talked about tonight, is we already want to talk about a community incentive program under CIP. So I think we can kind of tackle all these things together, and certainly I think all these projects are at least we can move forward with them in 2023 and keep the ball rolling.
Okay, so CAO Snell, do you think, with regards to option 2, do you think that that we should ask you to bring back a budget that would take that work plan forward, like a work plan and budget for that? Would you be happy to have that kind of direction from council at this point?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, we can include that in our 2023 budget proposal.
Okay. We'll throw it into the resolution and we'll see what council thinks. All right, Clerk Klein. Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to Councillor Anstedt. He can be brought up on the screen directly, I think, right? Councillor Anstedt.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, through you. And that was actually what I was going to talk about, was what you just mentioned about the budget piece. Being that we are in the process right now of the 2023 budget, I do think it's important that we do have that conversation just to get some funds, if we are going to put funds aside, that we do have that conversation so that we can include it, being that we are on a relatively tight timeline with our meetings. And also, as was already mentioned, the March 15th deadline. So that was the main point. I just wanted to ensure that the budget piece was going to be captured. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Anstedt. Okay, so is council ready to consider something that I've written down here as a little bigger, a little bolder resolution? All right. As follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth directs staff to apply for round 3 of the Rapid Housing Initiative for the North Perth Access Centre, depending on ability to meet the funding timeline. And that staff be directed to issue an RFI for market sounding pertaining to option 3. I didn't put a timeline there. And that staff be directed to bring back a work plan and budget estimates for option 2 at the earliest possible opportunity. Seem reasonable? Okay, can I call for a mover? Councillor Johnston, thank you. Councillor Blazak will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate further on this one? I'm feeling bad that we're not checking in to see if Councillor Anstedt wants to be mover or seconder, so maybe we'll have to be deliberate next time. Any discussion or debate? All right, seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried unanimously. We've saddled you up, I think is the right term, but we're grateful that you're bringing these options to our attention and that we get to do sink our teeth into some projects for the community on the issues of affordable and attainable housing. So thank you very much for all this work. You worked hard tonight, for tonight, yeah. All right, it's 8:30. I think it would be a good time for a health break at this point for 5 minutes. Let's resume at 8:40. We'll call it 8:40, okay? All right, we're back. Thank you, councillors, for the brief break. We have two items tonight from the Corporate Services Department. And item 5.5.1, council is invited to authorize by bylaw an interim tax levy for 2023. And I'm assuming we have Ms. Belfour. We have Ms. Hale, and she's available by web conference, I assume. So let's bring Ms. Hale in for a brief explanation of why we do an interim tax levy. Welcome, friend.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, members of council. Tonight, we're asking council to consider the interim bylaw. Bylaw outlines the terms by which we collect interim taxes, being 50% of last year's tax levy. And in addition to other charges that local improvements, waste bin, and any outstanding accounts we also collect on the interim tax bill. The bylaw also sets the due dates being March the 15th and June the 21st. And we ask council to consider passing this evening so that we can start the billing process.
All right, thanks, Ms. Hale. Councillors, any questions or first comments on this one? All right, so let's have the resolution as follows: that bylaw 1-2023, being a bylaw to provide an interim tax levy, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. And said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Nordham, thank you. Councillor Richardson will be our seconder. And any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up then
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Next up is a report from the clerk as item 5.3.2. This item, staff has brought forward recommendations that would establish and provide for the appointments to a governance review committee. And our clerk, Lindsay Klein, will review the background for the suggestion and provide an overview of the recommendations for action. Welcome, Ms. Klein. Let me just get the microphones and all that set up here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, through you to members of council. Before you is a report that staff have brought forward proposing the establishment of a new committee of council. We've called it the Governance Review Committee. Essentially, its purpose is to review various governance and council-related policies, like the procedural bylaws, our council code of conduct, council remuneration, our boards and committee structure, things of that nature. There are a number of governance-related policies and documents that haven't been reviewed in some time, and it's generally a best practice to review many of these documents once per term of council, approximately. And there also has been some recent discussion among council around things like the number of council meetings in relation to some of our comparators, as well as the number of boards and committees we have, and do they still serve their intended purpose, and when they were created. So a lot of these governance-related documents, policies, things like that are intertwined, like the number of council meetings is outlined in our procedural bylaw. Actually, we do have two procedural bylaws, one for council, one for boards and committees. So does that make sense? Our boards and committees procedure bylaw outlines the terms of references for our different committees. So as you start reviewing one thing, it's kind of like a slippery slope. They're all kind of interrelated. So staff are proposing the establishment of this governance review committee to help effectively and efficiently provide direction and feedback on this work, and to provide that feedback through a council lens, is ultimately all of this work will affect everyone around the horseshoe here. So a draft terms of reference was attached to the report. We kept it fairly high level at this point. We can narrow down the scope once the committee has been established, but essentially we're recommending that 3 councillors be appointed to the Governance Review Committee, and that its mandate is to review
governance-related policies and procedures with the purpose of improving accountability, transparency, and efficiency. So the committee would have the authority to direct staff relating to its mandate, but they wouldn't have any further authority to specifically approve anything. Any recommendations coming out of the work of the committee, such as changes to any policies or any bylaws, would still have to come forward to council for approval. So the recommendation before council is to approve the terms of reference for the Governance Review Committee, and we're seeking 3 councillors to put their names forward for appointment to this committee. And just a quick note on time commitment, I don't foresee this committee being a huge time commitment for councillors. There might be more touch points needed up front as we kind of set the work plan for what we're going to review and set our priorities. But once we have those plans in place, the bulk of the work will fall to staff to then bring any drafts or revisions and recommendations back to the committee for feedback. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Mayor, for any questions.
All right, thanks, Ms. Klein. Let's turn to council for questions and first comments. Perhaps first we ask questions about the terms of reference and the feasibility of doing this. So anyone have questions about the feasibility of doing this, the rationale for doing this, and the terms of reference that have been proposed, at least on an interim basis, until we get things up and running? Okay, Councillor Johnston.
Not really, just an overview of the terms of reference. I like that they're at a higher level, that they're not as specific. It would let the committee kind of dig into the boards and committees and the frequency and that kind of stuff, and the committee may kind of go as deep as they want then. So I like the fact that it's very vague, or vague-ish. That's a word.
All right. Before you know it, you'll be rewiring the building. Okay. Councillor Andreessen.
I just have a question through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, about that idea around committees. How would we, I would say, get input or feedback from, committees that we have existing at this point to find out the efficacy of and the, moving forward, the importance of having council membership on some of those committees or not, that kind of thing, what the impact would be?
So I'll let Ms. Klein answer this, but I'll observe that I'm sure that the committee can establish a work plan that might include, collecting information from existing entities, right? Ms. Klein?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's a good question, and I'd echo what you said. We would definitely include consultation with our existing committees and their members and any staff who work with those committees as part of the work.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the question set that we have for the feasibility, the terms of reference, that kind of thing. Then should the obvious next question, then the one that perhaps some of us are worried about because of fingers being pointed, are finding members of this council who might be willing to serve in this capacity. So I would entertain those who wish to self-nominate at this point. I do not want to miss out on Councillor Anstead. So Councillor Anstead, do you have any interest in service on this proposed committee should council approve it?
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg. Through you, yes. It is certainly something that's needed, and I know that this has been something that's been discussed for a little bit now. It's finally coming to council. Yes, I would be willing to serve if there was no other interest to serve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope there's more than no other interest here. Okay, let's go around the table. So Councillor Andreessen, would you be interested? Okay. Councillor Blazek, would you be interested in? Oh, could become a committee of the whole here. Deputy Mayor Callum. Okay. Councillor Johnston. Okay. Councillor Nordum would. Okay. Councillor Richardson.
I will pass.
Okay. And Councillor Rothwell.
I'd be interested in if others weren't, but they are so well stepped back.
Okay. Okay, so by my count, I have 5 names, and then me showing up as the occasional visitor, apparently. So apparently, so let's, do you have a recommendation, Clerk Klein, for a process to narrow this down? Maybe I should just ask, does anyone wish to withdraw hearing the full list of possibilities here?
I will withdraw. I mean, there's plenty of interest on the bill.
Okay, so Councillor Blazek has indicated that she'll withdraw at this point. All right, so that means we have 4. Could we change the terms of reference to use 4 councillors?
Through Mr. Mayor, I had initially put 5 members, but didn't think that, we'd get this much interest, but I'm happy to see this level of interest in this subject matter, so we could definitely amend the terms of reference to include everyone.
It might not be like watching paint dry. I don't know. All right. I really must tame my sense of humor tonight, huh? Okay, we have 4 names standing. Each of you whose names are standing still comfortable with standing? Mark, you okay with this? Councillor Nordham?
Yeah, I did see Neil.
Okay, Councillor Anstead?
So thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, through you. So I am still comfortable with standing. The only concern I have is just with my current situation. I know that Clerk Klein had indicated there would be some upfront work involved, so I just didn't want to slow anything down based on my current status.
I suspect that we could
accommodate,
yeah, in the same way we've accommodated tonight and for the near future for you, if you're interested. Councillor Rothwell, do you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just invitation to Councillor Blazek if we could have up to 5, if she was interested, if she'd willing to stand up again, if that's the case. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you want 5, I will
For the Star Trek fans out there, we're forming a board collective here. All right. So we have 5 members that have enthusiasm for the task. That's great. I just want to check that everyone who said yes earlier still willing.
Yes, and in the terms of reference, it talks about the quorum, and if there is 5 of us, three to 4, we can carry on with the meeting then. So, yeah. A committee of 3, and you get 1 absent, isn't that great a committee anymore. But a committee of 5, and we have 3 or 4, it's still pretty good. So, I'd say let's drive on.
Okay, so let's adjust that if it's council's wishes. Looks like we have our candidates to stand for this. So let me read the resolution then that has been proposed to us as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the terms of reference for the Governance Review Committee included as an attachment to the Governance Review Committee report dated January 30th, 2023, and that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth appoints 5 members of Council to the Governance Review Committee for a term ending on November 14th, 2026, being Councillor Anstead, Councillor Andreessen, Councillor Blazek, Councillor Johnston, and Councillor Nordham.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just for the first clause of the recommendation, I would just add as amended after terms of reference. So we change that to 5
Terms of reference
members.
as amended because we're changing the number amongst other things, right? All right, as amended. Everyone understand the resolution that's been proposed? All right, who will move it? Deputy Mayor Kellum is happily moving it, it would appear. And Councillor Rothwell will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And we're not seeing the e-scribe. And that is carried unanimously. Congratulations to those who have put their names forward. I had the privilege, just as an aside, to serve on a similar committee at the county at the beginning of last term, and it was very interesting. You really get deep into some matters related to the procedures of council, and I guess I'm enough of a policy wonk that I enjoyed it. So there you go. All right, let's move forward then. We've no reports tonight from the Programs Department as 5.4. We have one item to consider from the Facilities Department as item 5.5.1. Our Manager of Facilities and our Treasurer have jointly brought forward a report proposing the award of a contract in response to a request for proposal to shift landscaping architects related to new parks to be designed and associated services. I'm going to call on Mr. Newell, who is standing before us for an overview on this matter. Mr. Newell, let me just get the settings right here. All right, you are on.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg and members of council. Before you is a report with regards to consulting services for park development. You will note that the purpose is to, we circulate a request for proposal for consulting services for 4 locations: Dulwich in Atwood, Hannes Haven in Listowel, Lunar in Listowel, and Nickel Properties in Listowel. Council is likely aware that Lunar is no longer part of the planning process, as that subdivision is not moving forward at this time. But also, Council may recall during our budget visioning session, Councillor Andreessen mentioned the notion of some park development, playground structures, that type of thing in the Wallace area, as that may be needed. So I think we could point our direction to Wallace to get some public feedback as well for a park up in Wallace. So we would still have the four parks that we're looking at. The scope of work involves the initial consultation phase, which is input from municipal staff, the public, and the Recreation Advisory Council. It will include the design of the park, including visual renderings, layout, and specific components that would be utilized, a rationale as to why design choices were made, a construction plan for each of the designated parks, as well as a forecast for maintenance requirements for the design. There was also recommendations for park space and amenities and components that would be both passive and active. Once a report is sent through to RAC, then it would come forward at a council meeting with a presentation about the 4 properties and what we will envision. The project management phase of the project or of the consultation will be pre-construction meetings with the municipality and the contractor, managing the day-to-day construction, providing updates, making sure specifications and requirements are met, and managing any issues with the contractors. Also important to note quality control and a final review of the project. The timeline for this is will be pushed back slightly because of the procurement position being vacant for the last number of months, so it pushed us back as far as completing the RFP. We had 7 applicants, and it was a very competitive process. Evaluations were conducted by municipal staff, being the facilities and program staff. The decision, as indicated by the mayor, was for Shift Landscaping Architects in the amount of $34,940, which would be funded as part of our budget moving forward for this year, but from our development charges. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions or first comments on this matter? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thank you, Jeff, for the report. Can you just confirm, have we had dealings with Shift Landscaping Architects before?
Yes, we have. In fact, Shift Landscaping has done the MAP 59 projects. Yeah. So we have had some experience with them.
I was fairly certain. Thanks very much. That gives me even more confidence. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments? Councillor Andreessen.
Just through you, Mayor Kasenberg, thank you very much, Mr. Newell, for your consideration of placement of some updating parks in Wallace Township. It's really needed, and residents will be very appreciative of this work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a resolution in the absence of further questions and comments here as follows. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth awards the park consultant request for proposal NP-010-22P to Shift Landscaping Architects for $34,940 plus HST prior to the 2023 budget approval to be funded from development charges for this purpose. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Nordholm, thank you. And seconder will be Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And Councillor Andreessen records a vote in favor, so that means that we have 9 votes accounted for, and that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Newell. Let's move forward then. Item 5.6, reports from the Manager of Environmental Services. We do not have reports from this department this evening. They are, as always, working diligently on our behalf. Let's turn to item 5.7, reports from our Manager of Operations. As item 5.7.1, Council is asked to assume services in a recently completed subdivision of Walton Avenue in the Listo Ward. Let's hear from Mr. Lyndon Couch, our Manager of Operations, about this matter. Mr. Couch, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, members of Council. As part of a development agreement that was set up in 2019, the completion of that development is near. It is also located in Walton Avenue North. There's a key map that is attached to the report. It's a part of the corridor that we're upgrading and reconstructing. So with those two factors, the fact that the development is completed or near completed with one lot not finished, and that we're actually rebuilding the roadway, the assumption of the subdivision is necessary because of our activities. The recommendation here is to assume the services, which are the underground works and the gravel road that has been built at this time. As part of that agreement, we did retain securities for asphalt work along that corridor, so we will be retaining some of that money and it'll contribute to the project itself. So the recommendation again is for the assumption of services for Walton North as per the map.
All right, any questions or first comments on this matter? Seeing none, I have a bylaw enablement resolution as follows, that bylaw number 11-2023 being a bylaw to assume the services vested in the municipality by Snapstone Enterprises Limited and South Saugeen Development Limited be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Richardson, thank you, and our seconder will be Councillor Andreessen. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And Councillor Andreessen is registering a manual vote again, so that is in favor? In favor, all right. So that counts for 9 votes. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up then is item 5.7.2. Council is asked to create a formal delegation of authority through a bylaw resolution related to decisions to designate a significant weather event. Mr. Couch, you're back to tell us about this one too. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. In very recent memory, at Christmas time, we did have a significant weather event. This is the formal mechanism that's going to allow for the declaration of that, and it's also in conjunction both with the provincial regulation that allows us to do this, and also with policy that's parallel with the other lower tier municipalities, some of them as well as the county. So the declaration of the event usually will be done in conjunction with other governments because we share the same weather. However, it's necessary for us to have a guideline. This gives a comprehensive guideline. The regulation is attached, and basically if the conditions are nigh, if they're coming, or if they are imminent and they're happening regarding, and they're listed, blizzards, icy conditions on sidewalks and roadways, we can declare the event, and it'll allow the public to know that there's a significant problem in terms of navigating both the roads or the sidewalks. And it will have a duration. This gives us also a guideline as to when we call it, how long it lasts, and when we would remove the significant weather event. So the recommendation in front of the council is to follow Regulation 23902 from the province and establish this procedure and ability to declare events as they come up, and that staff would be allocated the responsibility to do so.
All right, questions or first comments from council? Seeing none, then I have a resolution as follows, that bylaw number 10-2023 being a bylaw to delegate authority to the operations manager or designate to declare the beginning and end of a significant weather event, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. And the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover, please? Councillor Blazek will be our mover, and a seconder will be Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor. My e-scribe is having an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anstedt. So with that vote, that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Couch, for that. Let's move along then to item 5.8, I believe, on our agenda. And these are reports from the Development and Protective Services Department. Let's see what's up first. Here is a zoning bylaw amendment for lands on Tremaine Avenue in the Elma Ward. And County of Perth planner Mr. John Bice, who works on North Perth files, is with us virtually to present an overview of this action. Mr. Bice, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg and Council. Just quick share my screen. And just making sure we can see that.
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone should be fairly familiar with this file. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA 1622 for 880 Tremaine Avenue. It's in Elma Ward. That's just on the settlement boundary with Listowel there. So the zoning bylaw amendment is a condition of some prior consent applications, and those applications are B44-22 and B45-22. And these were brought forth at the December 5th Council to receive North Perth comments, and both of those consent applications have gone through the county's delegated authority process. And then we had the public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment on December 12th with no comments received from the public. The ZBA is back today for a recommendation. So just to kind of jog everybody's memory, what we have here is the severance. It's the zoning report photo, but we're just with some severance text as you can see there, as there's severance in the yellow and in the blue, and the retained lands are red. So the subject lands are by the red star near the bottom of the image here, and they are currently zoned rural residential in the North Perth zoning bylaw. This slide is, excuse me, to give more of an overview on what exactly is being applied for here. With Severance 1, which is the south unit, it's currently zoned rural residential. It's proposed to go to an R4-24 zone, which is a residential 4 zone with some site-specific provisions, as you can see outlined in the text there. The second severance is the north unit, and again, it's currently zoned rural residential, and it will proceed to an R4-25 zone with site-specific provisions outlined underneath as well. And then finally, the retained land is currently zoned rural residential, and it will have a site-specific rural residential zone. It will be RR12-H7, and then the site-specific provisions are outlined below again. One item to note as well is that the H7 will be a holding zone placed on the rural residential site-specific zone for the retained lands. And that will be essentially so that the, if any sort of development was to occur, residential development in the future, to lift the holding provision, they'll need to complete a D6 noise compatibility study. This is an image of the semi-detached dwelling. As you can see that the R425 would be on the left, and then the R424 would be on the right, as the retained lands would be further to the north. This image is of the industrial facilities across the street, across Tremaine Street, and it's just kind of a reminder as to why the hold provision will be applied to the retained lands. And that is another image of the industrial lands. This image is of the current access for the semi-detached. There was conditions in the consent applications so that each semi-detached unit that was being severed has their own driveway access. And this image is just of the retained lands. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bice. We're getting some feedback on the microphones here. Let's see if there are any council questions or first comments on this matter. Anyone? Okay, I have a resolution then prepared for us about this as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the report entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Number ZBA 16-2022, submitted by Scott Patterson on behalf of Gordon and Darlene Galbraith, affecting lands described as 880 Tremaine Avenue, Plan 509, Lot 5, Elma Ward, Municipality of North Perth, and that Council approves zoning bylaw amendment number ZBA 16-2022, submitted by Scott Patterson on behalf of Gordon and Darlene Galbraith, affecting lands described as 880 Tremaine Avenue, Plan 509, Lot 5, Elma Ward, Municipality of North Perth. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Nordham, thank you, and Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this matter? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And Councillor Andreessen is recording manually that she is in favor, which gives us the required 9 votes, and that is carried. Thank you. Click on the home icon and then reload the meeting. Okay. Yeah, it seems a little laggy tonight, but okay, thank you. Next up then, yes.
My apologies, there's just another resolution. We did have a resolution to pass a bylaw, I think it's from
Okay.
so I can read it out.
Let me just get you on the microphone here. What 11? You have 11? You're 12. Okay. Did you wish to proceed?
Yes. So the resolution would read that bylaw number 9-2023 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 6ZB-1999 as amended.
Be introduced,
read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you, Clerk Klein. So resolution read into the record by Clerk Klein. Here I see Councillor Rothwell's hand waving. He'll be our mover for this one. Councillor Anstedt, how would you like to be a seconder?
I certainly would, Mayor Kaysenberg. Thank you.
Thanks. So our Councillor Anstedt is going to be our seconder tonight. All right. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote.
I am in favor. My e-scribe is having an issue again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anstedt registers a manual vote in favor. And Councillor...
Oh, there it is.
And Councillor Andreessen has now got her vote recorded, so that's carried. Yes, that's plaguing them here locally, yes. You seem quite smug with yourself about that. That's carried. I know. All right, as item 5.8.2, council is invited to exempt from part lot control lands designated as residential in the Listowel ward on Malcolm Crescent. The usual purpose of such an action is to allow adjustment of lot lines between residential parcels. And County of Perth planner, are we calling on Ms. Reid? Is she with us remotely? Thank you. Susanna Reid is to present an overview of this action. Welcome, Planner Reid.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gaisberg. And good evening, Council. This, as the Mayor has mentioned, is an application for part lot control, and I will share a few slides. So this is the location of the property on Danby Street in Listowel. And this is, the red line is outlining the existing 4-unit townhouse. And some photos, 430, 440, 450, and 456 Danby Street. The application then is to, did I stop sharing? Are you still seeing the screen? Maybe not.
We can see the screen.
So the application is to exempt this property from part lot control. And the property is designated residential in the Listowel official plan. It's zoned R5-7. The planning department has reviewed the 4 proposed lots, which the applicant proposes to create through the exemption of part lot control against the zoning bylaw, and the application conforms. Planning department's recommendation is that council approves the bylaw to exempt this property from part lot control and then forward the application to the manager of planning for approval.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reid. Let's turn to questions or first comments on this matter from council. Anyone have anything? All right, we have 2 resolutions here. The first is an approval one that reads as follows: that the North Perth Council approves the application by DeConing Brothers, Inc. for the exemption of part lot control on lands described as Plan 44M-27, lots 27 and 28, 430, 440, 450, and 456 Danby Street, Listowel, Municipality of North Perth, and forward it to the County of Perth for approval. Can I call for a mover on this one? Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you. And our seconder will be Councillor Noordam. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. And now the enabling the bylaw resolution here, that bylaw number 12-2023 being a bylaw to exempt from part lot control lots 27 and 28, Plan 44M-27, Danby Street East, Listowel Ward, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for mover on this one? Councillor Johnston, thank you. And our seconder will be Councillor Andries. Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none. Oh, we do have some. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question through you to Senior Planner Reid. In the bylaw, is it necessary to address the previous bylaw, 115-210, to ensure that it is no longer a bylaw of any effect? I know in the bylaw it's very similar in terms of its reading, but I'm just wondering if administratively we should address the previous bylaw.
Through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, sorry, I'm getting an echo. The situation that Councillor Rothwell is referring to is that when this, the owners of this property, DeCronin Brothers, received approval for exemption from part lot control in 2010. And then that they proceeded to deposit the reference plan. However, and unfortunately, the 4 lots were registered all in the same name. So when the part lot control bylaw that was initially approved expired, the lots merged again because they're all registered in the same title. So I appreciate the question. I would say I don't think it's necessary to refer to the previous bylaw because there has been a legal opinion received that the 4 lots have merged on title. So I think that the previous bylaw that was approved has no effect at this time.
Thank you. Interesting question. Anything else here? Okay, so this has been duly moved and seconded. Let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Planner Reid. Next up, the prime attraction from planning here. Item 5.8.3, Perth County Manager of Planning Sally McMullen has joined us to advise on the state of understanding of impacts on planning operations in Perth County resulting from the province of Ontario's decision to approve 2 key pieces of legislation, Bill 109, the so-called More Homes for Everyone Act, and Bill 23, the so-called More Homes Built Faster Act. It is fair to say that we are still in the earliest days of trying to understand the impacts, but much is changing. Ms. McMullen, welcome back before Council.
All right, so tonight I'm going to review 2 bills that were brought forward in the province, Bill 23 and Bill 109. Bill 109 occurred much earlier in 2022 and has many items that take effect January of 2023. So it's relevant to be talking about at this time. And Bill 23 was fast brought on the scene in October and received royal assent in November, I believe. The dates are escaping me now. That time is fast and things are moving quickly. So you'll no doubt have heard many things about Bill 23, and it encompasses a lot of information and several pieces of provincial legislation. And today I'm going to bring you specifically information about planning applications and how they're affected, and land use processes and how they're affected by these 2 bills. So the scope is specifically related to planning. Make sure Okay, I'm going to begin with 5 or 6 points here. These are things that happen sort of on a regular basis. They will be familiar to you in your capacity as planning authority. And I'm going to talk about them specifically before we get into some site plan control discussion. Specifically, the refunding of zoning bylaw and site plan control fees. Now, this comes from Bill 109, and the idea here is that if these planning applications are not decided, a decision isn't provided within the statutory timeframes, that being 90 and 60 days respectively, that the applicant is due 50% of their funds back. And that's an automatic refund. They don't need to ask for it. And municipalities need to be prepared to do that refund. This applies to applications that were received on or after January 1st of this year. And what we have done in the planning department is recognize that although these are both lower tier planning authority applications, that once they're received by the lower tier, that the planners and planning staff, our clerk as well, have sort of their finger on the pulse of how many days have passed, and we've added a day tracker to our file management list that we use, and we intend to spend some time with finance staff to discuss how they would like to initiate refunds and how we can inform them with appropriate triggers and appropriate lead-up time to when that might need to occur. Now, obviously, the idea is that we don't have this happen at all and that a decision is made within the planning horizon of the statutory timelines. And we have a pretty solid track record on that stuff, but there are outliers. So this is a reality that we'll have to face on certain applications. The next bullet point on the slide is about third-party appeals, specifically to minor variances and consents. So those two applications, you may have received appeals on those in the past and be familiar with that. What we're talking about when we say third party is essentially neighbors or individuals who may have spoken or submitted written comments at a public meeting. So municipalities can still appeal, agencies can, but third parties will not have that same opportunity. It's important to note on this that, and also the applicant themselves can appeal. So those are still intact, but it's important for applicants to know about this and for neighbors to know about this, so that when they are engaging in the public process, that they have full expectations, that they're clear, that then the appeal opportunities for them, should it be decided in a way that they're not happy with, is not there. This is similar to subdivisions and condos. The third-party appeal on those was removed by Bill 108 back in 2018, 2019. I'm looking at you, Councillor Rothwell, to remind me, to help me remember. Okay, in that vicinity, yeah. That brings up the next bullet point, which is about public meetings themselves. And Bill 23 removes the requirement that the planning authority, and in this case for subdivision and condos, that's county council, that they would not be required to have a public meeting for a plan of subdivision or a draft plan of subdivision or draft plan of condominium. And at the outset, that seems like maybe a bad idea not to have that, because we all value public engagement and the things that neighbors are able to bring to those meetings. And when we dig a little deeper, we can consider some other mechanisms by which folks can have their input when subdivisions are proposed. First of all, when the land is actually designated for residential or industrial or institutional use through a condominium or subdivision proposal, people can, I misspoke there. So when there's an official plan amendment, that sets up the land for that particular use. And there is a public meeting associated with that process for designating those lands for either residential or industrial uses or what have you. Then you would have the draft plan of subdivision application follow from that procedure. And in that case, the Bill 23 is suggesting that it's not required to have a public meeting at that stage. And then following draft plan of subdivision, almost always there's a zoning bylaw amendment that follows that. And again, that's a public process with a public meeting. So there are opportunities for public meeting engagement at the stage immediately before and after a subdivision. Now, we all know from experience that doesn't always happen within the same time frame, within the same year even necessarily, the designation of those lands and the subdivision plan coming forward. It's also important to note that for subdivisions and condos, the circulation process continues. So neighbors are still notified that there is an application been made, and they can see the notice will include some type of visual, and they're invited to contact staff or come into the office to have a look at information or ask us to send them information that they may like to consider before making their written comments or verbal comments to staff. So the opportunity for engagement still exists and is still invited from neighbors, and they are asked to do more of the legwork in this scenario, to come forward and find out the information and then put together their comments to bring to staff. And then it would be staff's responsibility to bring those comments through the review process and through into the recommendation so that council is informed of those comments. Ideally, however, our intent is that when comments are brought forward, that we actually work to resolve them during the review process. And I think there is an opportunity here to take a pause and look at more interesting ways for public engagement than a public meeting. And I am particularly interested in those that may happen at the pre-consultation stage and may be led by developers themselves. I think getting information from the neighbors about how the subdivision plan may affect them or the things that they are interested in or have concerns about are best addressed before the application is made. And so I think there's real opportunity here for developers to step up and have a look at those opportunities, because many of them have spoken to staff along the last few years and said, you know, we want to know what those comments are from the public before you get to the decision stage, because we used to have the public meetings quite close to a recommendation. And they're looking for opportunities to work with neighbors and resolve those things before they get too far along the process. And so I think there's an opportunity here, as I said, to look at interesting ways or more interesting ways to do public engagement. And certainly the basic process of them having access to information, being notified, and being able to submit comments through to staff to the developer and to work those out exists today. So if County Council decides that they would like to continue with the hosting of public meetings as part of the subdivision and condominium process anyways, that opportunity exists as well, and we would need to put together a policy internally to outline the procedures and processes for that public meeting. So I haven't necessarily thrown my hat into one ring or the other, have public meetings or don't have public meetings. I think if you dig on YouTube, you find that I have been leaning a little bit towards not having public meetings for subdivision condos and looking at those other mechanisms or more one-on-one opportunities to engage with neighbors. Having some recent experiences where we came to a public meeting for a subdivision and found that there was a few really interesting and specific comments from neighbors of a road allowance, for instance, I reflect and think, you know, would we have gotten those comments if we didn't have the public meeting? Would those folks have come forward with their written comments ahead of time? And would we have been able to work through them? And I would like to think that we would have. And perhaps there's more efforts that can be made to invite those comments and to invite people to engage, despite the fact that we wouldn't have a formalized public meeting. So I intend to dig a little deeper on this, do some thinking, and bring a recommendation to County Council at a future date. The next item on this slide is about the scope of conservation authorities, and it was brought up earlier in the meeting tonight through your consent agenda. And the one thing that we know for certain, and there was correspondence about this late in December from the Minister to Conservation Ontario, that Conservation Authority staff are meant to stick, with respect to planning applications, to their mandated core business of natural hazard, erosion and flood risk commenting, and to leave the natural heritage, which we refer to in the department as natural environment policies, to others. And Councillor Rothwell brought up earlier, you know, it's important to have resources in place to seek that professional advice. And the truth of our processes over the past couple of years anyways is that we don't have this service coming to us from conservation authorities anyways. It's not consistently, and they haven't had staff necessarily in their organizations to provide this to us. So we've become fairly accustomed to using private firms for this advice and helping us set up terms of reference for folks who have to do environmental impact studies, in helping us to comment on applications and to review those or peer review those studies when needed. So it's something that we hope to streamline a little bit in 2023. It was on our radar in 2022 and we got stifled a little bit around just the concern about having peer reviews at all. But we would like to streamline this a little bit by having somewhat of a roster of different professionals, and natural environment would be just one of the categories that we would seek to do that in. It is just very important to have the right professionals on your team to do the work that you need to do. The other part about Conservation Authority scope in Bill 23 was that there was some notion of planning approval and the Conservation Authority scope and permitting on natural hazard areas and how the two would interconnect. and that planning approval may supersede or exempt someone from having the Conservation Authority go through their regular permit process. And that piece of Bill 23 is still being sorted out. So there are parts specific to the Conservation Authorities Act that haven't been, they haven't come out in regulation. We don't have those details yet. And I just was pulling up some language from Conservation Ontario themselves, if I still have it available here, yeah. On this particular subject matter. So their point that they were making was development subject to Planning Act authorization should not be exempt from requiring Conservation Authority permit, and Conservation Authority regulations should not be delegated to municipalities. So it helps us to understand what's implied by Bill 23 by looking at Conservation Ontario's perspective on it, is that perhaps what's being contemplated is that if you're going through a planning application, that the Conservation Authority's scope and their mandate on erosion and flood would be lessened. And so we look forward to finding more information out about that and how it's going to affect our circulation and approvals processes. The final point on this slide is about lapsed subdivisions, and you'll all recall we have a couple lapsed subdivisions in recent memory here in North Perth. We've had a couple applicants or former applicants kick the tires, if you will, on this one. And my advice back to them was that before you come to the Planning Authority and ask for your subdivision, your draft approval, that to be reinstated. So they would be coming to ask that the draft approval that they received, they may be working on conditions or didn't fulfill the conditions or didn't work on the conditions, that they would come back and get that approval sort of reinvigorated, and they would be able to pick up where they left off and carry on. And so I've advised that we don't have a formalized application process for this, but that at the very least, I would want a letter from the applicant requesting that reinstatement and a clear justification as to why that subdivision in particular is still relevant, is still meeting the needs of the community, and official plan policy around subdivision, and that we would like to see them put their own best foot forward before we bring such recommendation requests and then planning staff's recommendation to council on those kinds of matters. And we haven't received any of those to date. So this would affect subdivisions that have lapsed within the last 5 years only. All right, I'm going to go on to, if I can get the clicker to go in the right direction.
Could we pause and ask
sure.
council if you have any questions about what was presented on that slide? Just to make sure that everyone is comfortable with Councillor Rothwell.
Good. Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and through you. Thanks, Sally, for the report. So North Perth, we did have specific experience dealing with the lapsed subdivision. Well, one that was coming up, that was going to be lapsed, that I believe County Council gave authorized extensions 3 times. And then finally, County Council, in part based on North Perth recommendation, did not grant approval for another extension. So that's a situation where they were coming close to the 5-year deadline. The deadline was in 3 times was extended, and the last time was not. So we're close to dealing with a situation like that. I will say that I am concerned about this specific issue because there are some older plans of subdivision that are out there that do have situations where they are no longer relevant, as you said. So that will be up to each local council to decide as to whether or not that meets the test or it doesn't. So I am not sure as the rationale of the province to open this up and take it, open it up again. Like 5 years is, in my view, plenty of time to decide as to whether or not you're going to proceed ahead or not. And clearly, as you're coming to a deadline, the least you can do is speak to your local council as to whether or not they would allow for the extension. I really don't see the value in this, but I'm not looking for an answer because it's before us. So the legislation, frankly, didn't care what we said. That's my 2 cents. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Andreessen.
Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, I just have a question for Ms. McMullen. I'm not sure if you're going to address it later, and if you are, great. It's a question about minimum distance setbacks for agricultural operations. In my reading so far, I haven't found anything that the bill has affected in terms of MDS. Are you going to address that today, or just do you have any information about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Bill 23 does not directly affect the MDS minimum distance separation formula and how it's applied and used. Indirectly, one could extrapolate that if there was a minor variance application for, and MDS was the subject matter, that the third party neighbor that didn't appreciate the decision wouldn't be able to appeal it.
That's a problem.
That's an indirect impact on MDS, but it's not specifically addressed or changed by Bill 23.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's bring Ms. McMullen back up to her next set of information, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little more in detail about 2 things: additional residential units and about site plan control. So first, additional residential units as of right. So effective immediately on January, actually back in December, or what date it was that the royal assent occurred, it's in effect now is the bottom line. 3 residential units are permitted on a lot. 2 in the main building, so 1 being the primary dwelling and 1 being an accessory within that structure, and then 1 more on the same lot in an accessory building. So with no minimum unit sizes. So the zoning bylaws today, and many zones permit that second residential unit on a site, but effective immediately upon the royal assent of this bill, we can't, despite what our official plan may say or despite what the zoning bylaw may say, we can't not permit this. So if they came forward for a building permit today and met all the criteria for the zone provisions otherwise, like the setbacks for different yards and everything in the building code, then we would not be able to prohibit that based on our current zoning bylaw provisions to the contrary, or official plan policies to the contrary. And the other, the no minimum unit size means that our floor area minimums for a dwelling unit wouldn't apply either. So they can be, someone could come forward with a proposal that's fairly small, even as long as they met the code requirements. As well, on additional residential units, new units built under this permission, they're exempt from development charges and parkland requirements, and we cannot require more than 1 additional space per accessory unit. So if we were looking to regulate this through zoning or site plan control, we're losing some of those opportunities, specifically around parking. We're going to get into site plan control now, unless there's a question.
So yeah. let's turn to questions. I have one. So it looks like Councillor Rothwell has one. So go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. So Sally, just my understanding is that on the first piece, is that specific to lots that are on full municipal services, or is this all lots?
It's all lots.
So again, the big issue, and this was talked about many years ago, is the whole issue of sewage systems. Sewage systems are not designed, well, they are designed to handle the capacity of the dwelling unit that it was installed for. Depending on the size of the units and the number of fixture units and so on, we could have the potential of a failing sewage system, which the province is clearly aware about, but it's become a critical issue for us as municipalities that to deal with an issue. My understanding was that at first it was going to be on the basis of full municipal services, but clearly that is not the case, and I will stand by my word that this is a problem waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. My question, I just want to be clear, is that this 3 units as of right applies just to lands that are zoned residential, or can it occur, for example, on farm severed lands? So where the farmhouse has been severed from the rest of the farm, can they put 2 more units there?
That in effect is a residential lot with a primary dwelling, and they could.
I see. Very interesting. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kellum.
So just a scenario. Last week I had a call about someone who wants to get into the housing market, wants to buy a 36-foot pole unit, go to 6 months up to a trailer camp, and then come back to a lot and park there for the other 6 months. Is that allowed?
You're going to have to run me through that one more time.
So they purchase a new 40-foot pole trailer and they go to a campground from May until October. He said, can he pull it back out and come back to a residential lot for the other 6 months?
To live in the
trailer?
No.
Okay.
That's not an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. Must be on a foundation?
It has to be an accessory building.
An accessory building. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nardi.
Thanks for the report. Is a tiny home on wheels considered an accessory building?
You're getting into some building code questions. I think there's some specifications around the wheels part.
Okay.
They need to have connection, like, to services of some sort. So the wheels become somewhat moot at a certain point.
Tiny homes are a complicated subject, and the building code is quite complex as it intersects with that. I've done a little bit of homework on that subject, so I don't want to draw it out, but you and I can talk later if you're interested. I'm sure Councillor Rothwell would love to weigh in on that one too. CAO Snell?
Thank you. So I just want to be clear, even though we have planning permissions, all the accessory dwelling units still have to meet both building code and fire code. So just because they're allowed doesn't mean they still have to meet those other 2 pieces of legislation that primarily deal with safety of occupants. So those 2 still have to be met. And I'm not the expert either in the technicality of whether a tiny home meets the building code, but certainly we could look into that if council suggests.
It's one of the propositions, actually, sorry, just briefly, that Councillor Rothwell and I included in our paper to the province, because we contributed a thought paper, and we talked about the issue of the province or some other authority actually issuing approved tiny home plans that builders could just use as of right kind of thing, right? But that's one of the issues, is that, they have to comply with the building code, and there are certainly a range of requirements. So I think that's important to consider. Anyone else with a question about the additional residential units, ARUs here? Okay.
So building on CAO Snell's point, this isn't carte blanche. They still have to go through certain procedures and policies to make sure that they meet the other zone provisions for yard setbacks, for lot coverage, for those types of things, and certainly that the building and the additional units within it meet the building code. So what this does in effect is it takes some of the onus from planning processes and puts it into building processes, which are shorter term and don't have a pre-consultation component. So we'll touch on that a little bit later in my slides as well. I was just thinking of another part about, okay, so we had just nicely finished a zone amendment in sort of the 4th and final lower tier to permit a second unit on farms. We did that just this past fall, maybe a month or so before Bill 23. So we were going in the direction of a second unit on some of those septic or private servicing. And again, the onus shifts really to building to make sure that what's being proposed on those sites through building permits, that the existing water and sewage infrastructure can handle that. And if not, then they'll need to upgrade those systems. So site plan control is sort of the final piece I want to do a bit more of a deeper dive into. This is a bit of a laundry list of things that we do regulate through site plan control. And we work closely with the building department to look at site plan applications and to make sure that all of these things are taken into account. The real purpose of site plan control is twofold: to ensure that sites function well, and to ensure that sites have compatibility, as much compatibility as possible with neighboring uses. So that's what we're really talking about here. And site plan control through Bill 23 has been removed. It's no longer a tool that's available to us for residential developments that have 10 or fewer lots. So your quadruplexes, your small 8-unit apartment buildings, we can't use site plan control to regulate this list of items for those types of developments any longer. And we got together with building department folks within each of the 4 lower tiers, as well as planners and building staff from the city of Stratford, and we got together and sort of tried to put our heads together as to how can we achieve some of these things through other mechanisms. Because it's very important that residential development occur in our community, as we've seen earlier tonight, is top of mind for everybody. It's just really important that we get some units available in our communities. And we want to make sure that it's done very well and that it's still a pleasant place to live. These individual developments are still quite pleasant places to live. The other thing that happened through Bill 23 with respect to site plan control is that regardless of the type of land use, so whether that's residential, industrial, commercial, institutional, that despite the type of land use, we can no longer use site plan to regulate either architectural features or landscape design. So these were 2 of the main things we were using to help with compatibility in particular, and to make sure that there was appropriate buffering between sites and that they were aesthetically going to work within a neighborhood. And so this one also presents some challenges, and we had just finished in the department a guideline that we hope to put out around intensification of residential uses, and it largely looks at design as one of the main ways to do it well. And that guideline still has quite a lot of good use, and we're going to have to use tools like that to instead attract developers to this task, despite it not being regulated through site plan control. So this slide shows you, I've highlighted in green some of the things that this group of minds that I described to you with building and planning staff got together to consider. And these items in green are the ones that we identified as we could probably address through other fairly low-hanging fruit types of mechanisms that are already in place or that could be amended, being zoning bylaws, building bylaws, and site alteration bylaws. So we kind of made it like a working group, and there was a bit of a task list, which included some of these items in red, which are harder to get at or require a little bit more work to get at, so that we can still have some provisions in place to help developers set up their site plans to achieve the compatibility and the functionality that we would have achieved otherwise through this site plan control. And so that group got together about a month ago and again earlier today, and have, I think, covered a lot of these items that you will, I think you're going to hear a little bit about it in your next report as well. But we think we have been able to get at most of this stuff through other mechanisms. I wanted to point out too that on the architecture and landscaping piece, there are specific exemptions. So as this site plan approval has been delegated to staff, which was also a Bill 109 initiative. But there is an opportunity here for staff informing that planning authority be that building staff or planning staff, to say, hey, there's a health reason here why we should, in fact, regulate architecture or landscaping, or there's an accessibility reason here why we should regulate architecture and landscaping, and that would be an option available to staff because of these specific exemptions. You're probably familiar with all of them on there: health, safety, accessibility, and protection of adjoining lands, but the one maybe that isn't quite as easily just understood, perhaps, is the sustainable design. And in order to be able to use that one as a reason to pull architecture or landscaping back into site plan control, we'd have to have policies around green infrastructure or sustainable buildings, that type of thing, because then we could rely on that policy to justify that exemption. We're getting quite close to the end here. So I just wanted to leave you with a few summary points. In our working group and in the planning department, we have really looked at Bill 23 in particular as, hey, this is on our plates. It's happening. We should not use our energy to sort of belabor perhaps what in there is difficult or isn't going to work that well, and maybe shift to seeing what we can make of these amended tools that we have in front of us to actually see what good could come from it. So affordable housing units, perhaps, and increased densities, which were goals all along. So we're trying to take a very positive look on this and use it to the best we can to do some good work in the community. I think what's really important and top of mind for me in particular is that this shift away from planning tools lands a lot of that stuff on our building staff. And so it's going to take a toll on building departments, and it's going to take a toll on bylaw enforcement. So some of those things that we maybe would have more easily got to through site plan control, for instance, will result potentially in higher numbers of complaints. And more work, essentially, for building and bylaw staff. And as I said before, building departments have a shorter time frame to deal with applications for building permits than we do for planning applications, and they don't have the pre-consultation aspect of it to really sit with developers and hammer out some ideas and information before the application shows up. So I think it's realistic, or we would be naive to think that there won't be a toll on those two sets of staff, and that's something that we should be mindful of and keep our eye to. And then with respect to the new official plan, I have been working on edits over the last couple of days specific to Bill 23 for the text that we had prepared for the new official plan. And there seems to be quite a lot, actually, with respect to housing in particular. And so the other thing that I have on my radar is that just sort of on the heels of Bill 23, the province also issued a posting that they were looking at combining the growth plan with the PPS, and they outlined a bit of a scope document for what that might look like, and I didn't include it as an attachment to your report. If you look at that document, it's a little bit vague, but I am cognizant that at some point, and maybe in the very near future, we will receive a new PPS, and I suspect that we'll get very little time to review and comment before it becomes enacted. So in my mind, then, I'm keeping a little bit of a placeholder for further edits to the text of the new official plan, but we're going to carry on with our schedule of events to start moving into committee work on that draft plan in the next couple of months. So I anticipate something maybe even as close as spring, and we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Those are my final comments on this update for you on Bill 109 and Bill 23. But certainly reach out if you have questions after today.
All right. Thanks, Ms. McMullen. Planning is always a complex area, and of course you've had to wade through a whole bunch of complexity that's been created in legislation of late. So we thank you for the update and for, at least to my mind, making it reasonably coherent. We sort of understand where that's going. Councillor Andreessen has a question or comment. Go ahead.
Thank you. One more question for you, Mayor Kasenberg. Under the exemptions, you talked about how the protection of adjacent lands could be considered something that could be an exemption. Could that be related to the protection of agricultural land?
It could be. Agricultural uses themselves are exempt from site plan control. So if the neighboring use was agriculture also, then it wouldn't be going through site plan in the first place. If it was an ag-related use, like a feed mill or that would, and we could use it that way. And we could evaluate impacts. We'd have, the onus is on staff to justify using one of those exemptions and to say, here's where that exemption occurs. And so we think we should bring landscaping and architecture back into the mix.
Okay, thank you.
These changes primarily are about residential use though, right? So you mentioned like agricultural uses or ag-related uses, and those might not be subject to these provisions. Or
those changes to site plan specifically around architectural design and landscape design, those go across all uses.
Yeah. An important piece of the puzzle. Okay, thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments at this point? Let's try to hold the rants down. I know it's easy to rant about this subject, so she's just the messenger for planning. Thank you. Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, and thanks again, Sally, for the comments. My opinion is that the province of Ontario and making these changes was not listening to the municipalities and staff working with developers. And if they were speaking to those municipalities, they were talking to GTA centered. They were not talking about a development here in North Perth or anywhere outside of the GTA that I can see, wherein there are specific issues based on volumes. And frankly, how can you process incredible volumes in the timelines that they're suggesting? It's just impossible to do so. So what we've done, what I think the province has done here is put forward a whole potpourri of changes of which they have little or no understanding of the implications that they will have on our communities. For example, when we're talking about site plan developments or site plan approvals and so on, the standard would be that forethought will ensure that development occurs as approved, so that with professional input and so on regarding everything from stormwater management through to types of light standards and so on, that those are all addressed up front, as opposed to complaints coming in from neighbors that, oh yes, that light that you have here does cast glare and it should not be of that standard, you'll have to replace that. That is costly to A, the community that has to go off and do that, B, the municipality that has to go and ensure that there's no undue hardship on neighboring property owners, and 3, it's a cost to the developer that's going to have to replace what they should have put in the first place. So that's an opinion that I am sharing, and I suspect that many other municipalities are going to share the same opinion, that unfortunately the legislation that's been brought forward in a comprehensive approach was not on the basis of a great deal of forethought, but based on addressing the needs of a loud few developers that seem to have the Premier's ear on this. And unfortunately, I think it does not bode well for our communities. That's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. Anyone else before we consider a resolution on this? We have a simple resolution. This is a report for information. So, all right, Ms. McMullen, thanks for sticking it out with us to this late hour, and we trust you'll give your kids our regards. I have a resolution for our consideration as follows. The Council receives the implementation update report, legislative changes of Bill 109 and Bill 23 report for information. I'm adding those words there to Clerk Klein, for information, at the end of the resolution. Can I call for mover on this one? Councillor Richardson, thank you. Councillor Nordum as our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. Let's see if eScribe's still awake. And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Next up then is item 5.8.4. Another juicy to dig our teeth into. Council is presented with the first of many policy changes that emanate from the province's passing of Bill 23, the so-called More Homes Built Faster Act. Let's call on our Manager of Development and Protective Services, Jenny Pape, and we're relying on your savvy here to explain what is changing in an overhaul of what is referred to as our building bylaw. Chief Pape.
Thanks, Mayor Kaysenberg. Good evening, Council. Bill 23 amends the Planning Act to remove site plan control requirements for most projects with fewer than 10 residential units, as Ms. McMullen just gave us some great insight about. Proposed updates to the municipality's building bylaw address site alteration concerns. Site plan control is a planning tool that enables municipalities to impose site-specific requirements on development. The site plan review process considers matters including access for pedestrians and vehicles, walkways, lighting, waste facilities, landscaping, drainage, and exterior design. The site plan review process enables well-designed development compatible with surrounding land uses, minimizing potentially negative impacts to neighboring properties. The proposed changes to Bylaw 46/2014 include requirements specific to site alteration, complementing North Perth's existing zoning bylaw provisions. The proposed changes have been reviewed by the municipal engineer, the operations department, and the CAO. Additional revisions to other bylaws are anticipated in the coming months as the impacts of Bill 23 are further considered. I would be happy to take your questions at this time.
Let's get my microphone on. Yes, councillors, questions or first comments about this? This is replacing a rather dated bylaw at this point and intends to address some matters associated with Bill 23. Anyone with questions or comments? All right, I have a resolution then to enable this bylaw as follows. That Bylaw 7-2023 being a bylaw respecting construction, demolition, and change of use permits, site alteration, and inspections within the municipality of North Perth be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Johnston. Councillor Ansted's still out there, right?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
We'll get you next time. We'll get you next time. All right. Any discussion or debate or comments at this point? All right, seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Pape. All right, that brings us to item 6 on our agenda. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you would like to ask of staff or of our committees at this point? Seeing none, let's move to item 7. We have received 2 items of correspondence which invite our action. For item 7.1, we have a request from the Atwood Lions Club requesting support for a social gaming event associated with Patty Fest in March of 2023. I'm going to turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Kellum for purposes of a declared pecuniary interest, since I am a member of the Atwood Lions Club. Deputy Mayor, it's in your hands.
Thank you. And for the record, please note that Mayor Kaysenberg has declared pecuniary interest on 7.1. Moving on, we do have a resolution. Who would like to speak to this first? I think it's pretty straightforward with the Atwood Lions. They do this yearly for a social gaming permit. So I do have in front of me that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth supports a request from the Lions Club of Atwood to conduct a social gaming event on March 18th, 2023 at the Steve Kerr Memorial Arena. Councillor Anstett, would you like to move that?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Rothwell? May I have the vote? And I'm obviously in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Please invite Mayor Keseberg back in.
For item 7.2, we have a request from the Listowel Kinsman Club regarding support for a social gaming event associated with Patty Fest in March of 2023. Council, is there any objection to considering that a motion pertaining to this at this hour? All right, then here's a proposed resolution that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth supports the request from the Kinsman Club of Listowel to run a social occasional gaming event and cystic fibrosis information night at the Kin Station as part of Patty Fest on Friday, March 10th, 2023 from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Richardson, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have a vote on that. And that is carried. Thank you. Let's turn then to a consideration of bylaws that have been recommended to us for action. First, for item 8.1, Council is asked to amend bylaw number 94-2020 to provide for the construction of the Wallace Concession 4 municipal drain, which final cost allocations are now available and to be applied to the affected parties. Any questions before we consider this matter? Seeing none, bylaw enabling resolution as follows, that bylaw number 6-2023 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 94-2020 to provide for the construction of the Wallace Concession 4 municipal drain be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed. The said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Nordum will be our mover. Councillor Anstett, would you be our seconder here?
Yes, I would second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And with Councillor Andreessen is in favor. So with that, that is carried. Thank you. And we have another bylaw to consider here under 8.2 as follows, that bylaw number 8-2023 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 160-2015, the fees and licenses bylaw, Schedule F, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed. And said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover on this? Councillor Johnston will be our mover. Councillor Rothwell is our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote.
I'm in favor. My e-scribe is down.
Thank you. Councillor Anstett registers a manual yes vote, and that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 9. Are there any councillors wishing leave to give notice of motion this evening? I'm not seeing any at this hour, so let's move to item 10 on our agenda. For item 10.1, this is that good news section, Council. Any announcements that are of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? I am not seeing any tonight, which means we can move to agenda item number 11. We have two matters to be considered in a closed session of council. I will read the resolution that explains and enables our action to enter this closed session as follows. The council proceeds in camera at 10:15 p.m. to address a matter related to the following. A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board regarding Town of Minto request, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding property described as 211 Inkerman Street West, Plan 151, Part Lot 82 West, off Argyle, 221 Argyle Avenue North, Plan 151, N Part Lot 82 S Part, oh gosh, Lot 83, with respect to Argyle, these instructions are terrible. And 229 Argyle Avenue North, Plan 151, Part Lots 82 and 83, intersecting, I guess, with Argyle Street, Inkerman Street, WRP 44R 4103 Part 2. I did not practice that, and I should have. And don't ask to repeat it, Councillor Johnston. Let's call for a mover on this. Councillor Richardson, thank you. Councillor Blazek, you'll be our seconder here. Any discussion or debate on this motion? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that is carried. Council is adjourned from open session. Those who are in the room who should not be because they have not been invited to be in the room should leave, and we will reset the AV. Okay, we should test to see if we're back on YouTube. Can anyone? Not yet. Oh, I see what. I see a problem here. Well, we are. Isn't that good news? All right. Okay, so for item 12 on our agenda, I can confirm that Council did discuss the matters identified in our enabling resolution for a closed session meeting of Council. And that in fact, Council did give staff direction pertaining to both items, the essence of which will remain confidential at this time for the reasons that were stipulated in our enablement of closed session. Council has a mandated good practice acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the confirmatory bylaw. Because I have declared a pecuniary interest earlier in the meeting, I'm going to turn things over to Deputy Mayor Kellum to conduct this particular matter. And I think we have everything in order for you here. So, yeah.
Perfect, thanks. Please note that Mayor Kaysenberg has left the meeting room and has declared pecuniary interest. So, Council, nearing the end of our meeting, I do have a resolution that reads that bylaw number 13-2023 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth be introduced, read, and consider read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the Deputy Mayor and the Clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Moved by Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Nordem. All those in favor? Are you sending the vote? I'm sorry. And I am in favor. Yeah. Do you have me? And that is carried. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks to the Deputy Mayor for his service on 2 occasions tonight. I appreciate it. Okay, we are at that point of adjournment. We have certainly earned our keep tonight, I think. And so let's consider the resolution for adjournment as follows. That the council meeting adjourns at 10:49 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, February 6, 2023 at 7 p.m. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Blazek, thank you. And Councillor Anstead. Councillor Anstead is going to move second adjournment. Yes.
Yes, I would second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Not debatable, so let's have that vote. And that is carried. Our next regular council meeting is Monday, February 6, 2023. Until that date, this meeting is adjourned.